What's up? I am just sort of gonna do this by myself. Basically this is my homework. I'm doing my homework, but I'm doing it live on Twitch, and you can do some homework with me. We're gonna hang out. Today we're going to be watching the Human Rights Commission meeting from Monday, which was a long and substantive interview with the police department. The Human Rights Commission has one interview like this with the police department every year, and it is very interesting. I watched a portion of it on Monday, but I need to watch the whole thing because I'm going to write about it for Sunday. And yeah, so I think, I figure why not watch it as a group. Here's the agenda for the meeting. I'm going to start it up in a second, but before that, I'm going to share a folder of WPD responses to some of the questions that the Human Rights Commission had. And I haven't really dug through any of this myself, but there's a lot of sort of juicy seeming public records in here. So feel free to dig into it. The questions are in the folder. So pretty interesting stuff. Yeah, Ruth, this is a perfect, this is what Worcester Council Theater 3000 is all about. Watching this by myself was feeling like a gigantic and arduous chore, but this should make it a little bit more fun for me and for anybody else who is thinking about watching it. Let's get it going.
To the May 6th meeting of the Human Rights Commission.
Unfortunately,
and I'm privileged to chair this
there's
commission.
no caption.
And I would like to begin with an official call to order and the roll call.
Here, but whatever.
Sure. Ellen Chemitz.
Present.
Liz O'Callahan.
Present.
Robert Bellata.
Present.
Guillermo Creamer. Randy Feldman.
Present.
Charles Hopkins.
Present.
Bernard Reese.
Present.
Jacqueline Yang.
Here. Thank you so much
Quorum.
for being here. It's great that we have quorum. Just a couple of notes.
How's the audio balance between
Vic did not call the name of Jermaine Ortiz.
I'm going to be pretty quiet during this, I think. We've taken some notes.
His resignation, so he will no longer be joining us, and I guess we will have an opening on the commission. Also, Commissioner Hopkins' first term has expired, but under the rules of the City of Worcester, the revised ordinances, any officer, any commissioner, unless he resigns or is removed, continues to serve
I have the link for
until
the agenda
either
here.
he is reappointed
Did I put
or
that in the
his
chat?
vacancy is filled. And so we're delighted that Commissioner Hopkins is still
Agenda
with us
should be up
this
there in the
evening.
chat.
I also do want to note that we have guests and speakers from the Worcester Police Department.
The,
we are going to officially acknowledge and
the questions that are going to be the most interesting, I think,
so
are
I'm not
on
ignoring you, but I just
translators,
want to some of the administrative
on
work we have before
Shot Spotter,
I officially welcome
and
you all.
on the
I
city's
also want
homeless
to note that
response.
after each section
So
of the
that's
agenda,
those
there
are
will
the
be an
things that I'm
opportunity
looking
for
for.
public comment. If you are online, you can let Attorney Perez know in the chat section if you would like to be heard at the end of each section, and that's how we will proceed. At the start of each of our meetings, we read our mission statement, we define the key terms that we use, and we do a land acknowledgement. And I'd like to begin by asking Commissioner Bellata to remind us of our mission, please.
Sure thing. The Human Rights Commission was established to promote the city's human rights policies. It is the policy of the city.
Pretty interesting that they start
every
with a
individual
land
equal
acknowledgement instead
access
of the
and benefit
Pledge of Allegiance
from
and
all
starts by
public
dinner,
service,
like City Council.
to protect every individual in the enjoyment and exercise of civil rights, and to encourage and bring about mutual understanding and respect among all individuals in the city. Our work requires us to address institutional racism so that as a community, we can achieve racial equity. Our work also requires us to make visible the unheard, unearned, and unquestioned privilege enjoyed by some members of our community to the detriment of others. We take time to make this acknowledgement, to educate so a path can be cleared for healing.
Thank you, Commissioner. And now I'd like to ask Commissioner Yang, if I could trouble you to read the terms,
Yes.
please.
The term institutional racism refers specifically to the ways in which institutional policies create different outcomes for different racial groups. The institutional policies may never mention any racial group, but their effect is to create advantages for whites and the oppression and disadvantage for people from groups classified as people of color. The term racial equity is the active state in which race does not determine one's livelihood or success. It is achieved through proactive work to address root causes of inequalities.
That's
to
quite a
improve
bit.
Outcomes for all individuals. That is through the elimination of
Tyler
shifting
Sterner, does it say
policies,
what,
practices, attitudes, and
what unit?
cultural messages that reinforce differential outcomes by race or
I
fail
don't
to
know that name.
eliminate
I don't
them.
know that guy.
The term privilege describes the unearned social power in informal institutions of society to all members of a dominant group. For example, white privilege and male privilege. The privilege
Start a
is
pool
usually
here.
invisible to those
Somebody find
inside
out what
it
uni is
because
in,
we are
and
trained
I'm putting
not to see
$100
it,
on
but
that gang.
nevertheless, it puts them at an advantage against
You know what?
others
$500.
who do not have it.
That's how confident I am.
Thank you, Commissioner. And finally, Commissioner Hopkins, if you could read our land acknowledgement, please.
We acknowledge the traditional and ancestral territory of the Nipmuc, the first people of Massachusetts whose lands we are convening on tonight. While the Nipmuc history predates written history, records from the 1600s inform us that the original inhabitants of Worcester dwelled principally in 3 locations: Packagug, Tatasset, Tatnuck, and Wigwam Hill, North Lake Ave. It is important to make this acknowledgement and to honor the ancestors that have come before us. It is all too easy to live in a land without ever hearing the traditional names and the history of the people who first resided and prospered in these lands and continue to reside and prosper.
Thank you so much. We're going to move on to the second item on our agenda, which is an update on a pair of memoranda. The first, which you received in your packets, commissioners, and which is available online for the public. The first is a memorandum that we sent to the city manager on March 28th of this year, in which we both shared with him a number of policy recommendations that we had made with respect to the Worcester Police Department policies on limited English proficiency, juvenile arrest, and use of force, and which we'll be discussing in part today. But there were also 3 other requests. We asked that the city manager resume meetings with leadership. We'd been having quarterly meetings that hadn't taken place in the last quarter. We asked that he respond to our policy recommendations in writing. The idea being that our focus, our purpose as a commission is to make
Provis, I got the
concrete policy
spreadsheet. I got the
recommendations to
spreadsheet of
city
use of force
manager
pulled
to
up
move
too.
the
And
city further towards our
really,
goal
really
of
love the
equity and
term
opportunity
empty
for all
hand
residents.
compliance technique.
And that unless there's some sort of back and forth and response, it's hard to know whether those policies are moving forward. So we asked for
Empty hand
responses
compliance
to
technique.
that. And we also asked for him to move forward on
What
our policy
a
recommendations that we made with
you-
respect to the Office of
example of
Emergency
top
Communication and Management.
Slap, brother.
You should have received as well the city manager's response, which is dated April 18th. And in that memorandum, the city manager indicated that he will no longer be meeting with HRC leadership. He indicated that he'd really agreed to the meetings during a period of transition when we were merging with the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee, and also when there's transition in leadership of our staff, and that he felt that had been completed. Although I would note, we still don't have a staff liaison. Attorney Perez is doing yeoman's work of covering 3 jobs, including interim staff manager for us, staff liaison for us. And he also indicated that he's not going to be responding to our policy recommendations in writing. I just wanted to ask if
Yeah,
any of the
this stuff
commissioners had any
is-
thoughts or reflections on this, and or if Vic as staff
The
liaison wanted to
drama
add anything to
between
make sure that everybody was up to date
the city
on what
manager
we've done
and
and the city manager's
Human Rights
response.
Commission seems to stem entirely from the
Sure. So through the chair,
Yeah.
so the only thing I'll
Please.
say, and this is reflected in the memo, the rationale, as Chairperson Chemins mentioned, at least in part, was related to this communication that there was a fulfillment in the reasons for having these exceptions to the common communication between the city manager and boards and commissions. And there was also an attempt to ensure uniformity, equity across boards and commissions by having communications across all boards and commissions be the same, that all communications would go across the board through the staff liaison for HRC, as is the case with all other boards and commissions. That was also reflected in the memo.
Any questions and or discussion on this? Liz?
Yes, can I just knowing that we have, the members of the commission have had so much to
Ruth,
pour
feel
through
free to
recently, and recognizing
anything
that
to
there's a
me
lot
on,
of content here and that we have a number of guests waiting, I wanted to
Twitter
just
or
acknowledge that
Instagram, anything.
you received it, but I feel like
Emails,
I also need some
Billstrainer91,
time to
you know that.
digest the content of that, given all of the things that we have had before us in the last couple weeks. So I'm hoping that after some thoughtful consideration, if this is something we could potentially circle back to once we've had a chance to collect our thoughts.
I think that's very sound. Any objections? So why don't we put that on the agenda for the next meeting so that if people have thoughts, questions, concerns, recommendations, we can move forward with that when we don't have a full panel waiting to present and meet with us. Thank you. That's an excellent idea. The one other administrative thing I just want to let you all know that Vic let us know this afternoon is that we do have outstanding requests that are reflected in that last memorandum to the Post Commission for data. We had hoped to have that in time to discuss it with our guests today. We did not receive that, but we should receive that by the end of next week, and we'll get that out to all of you as soon as we receive it. So I think that sort of covers the administrative things in part 2. And unless there are any questions, I want to move us on to our annual conversation with the Worcester Police Department. And seeing none, Vic, nothing online, I am going to move us on, and I'm going to begin, rather than telling you who you all are, asking you to do us the courtesy of, well, first of all, welcoming you, and then asking you to introduce yourselves.
To the chair, thank you for having us tonight. My name is Paul Saucy. I'm the interim police chief.
Through the chair, good evening. Carl Supernor, Deputy Chief of Operations and Special Operations in Parks.
Yes, good evening. My name is Edward McGinn. I'm a Deputy Chief of the Worcester Police in charge of support services.
Sean Fleming, Deputy Chief Administration.
Captain Ken Davenport, Commander of the Bureau of Professional Standards.
Use your mic there, Cap. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sergeant Agent Miranda. I am the Chief Diversity Officer for the department, work out of the Chief's office.
Good evening, through the chair, Lieutenant Sean Murtha, working the Chief's office.
Well, thank you and welcome to all of you. And before we jump into the data, I just want to acknowledge we gave you all really substantial requests, and you guys have done a simply outstanding job of getting back to us, and we want to acknowledge it and we appreciate it. I have to say that in the past, there's been a bit of a push and pull trying to get data, and it just feels like there has been a sea change, and we want to acknowledge it and thank you for that. And also thank the city manager, because I know that he was very instrumental in asking you all to work with us directly. So we do recognize how different it is. We appreciate all of the work that's gone into this. And what I'm going to try to do is ask I've
There's the
had some
agenda right
suggested
there.
groupings
This is
of how we go
so
through this.
for
we
people who
actually
are
get to all of the data.
just tuning
so
in,
it's
this
not
is a
data
meeting that
dump, but
happened
it's a data
on Monday,
discussion.
so it's not happening
And so
right
my
now.
recommendation,
I'm just
if it's
streaming it
okay
now
with you
because
all,
I
is that we
need to watch the whole
begin
thing
with the
for
BOPS
Worcester
report.
Sucks.
And that would then be question 2 and
There's a
actually
lot in
question
here.
31
So that's the
in questions
agenda,
we
and then
gave
here's
you.
a
So
folder.
question 2 is asking for an update on the annual BOPS report, and question 31 is a discussion about how BOPS will work with the Division of Investigations of the EODEI.
With
So,
a bunch of
Captain Davenport, the
interesting
floor is yours.
spreadsheets and such provided by the police department.
Excuse me. Through the chair, the question that I was given was number 2, annual Bureau of Professional Standards report for 2023, including not only the annual chart with listing of each case, incident type, allegation, disposition, and demographics of any officers as well as the complainants. So I did send you guys an attachment which included those items. Now, question 2A, a cross-check against post-commission listing of sustained allegations and disciplinary actions and explanation of any discrepancy between BOPS and post listings. So the sustained findings, the sustained cases that were sent are listed there, 12, 15, 16, and 17 for 2023. Those were not reported to post. The reason those were not reported to post is post has rules that you can abide by in order to decide on what you're sending to post. And one of them is minor matters, including discourtesy, basic work rule violations such as tardiness, inattention to detail, equipment violations, grooming violations, or comparable infractions. Those we don't have to send. So that's why those were not sent to post.
So can I ask you questions about some of the data that you did send us, the
Yes.
charts? So I looked at it and I looked back to 2017 up to 2023 through all the data that you've provided us. And it seems like the trend is a decrease
That might be
in
in the agenda.
number of
It wouldn't be in
complaints.
the.
I mean, the numbers were
from the
at
police
or
department.
above 100, 2021
I'm
and
not sure.
back. For some reason, I'm missing 2022 and I apologize. But this year it was only 54 allegations or complaints.
Oh, it
if I
actually,
read
yeah. If you go to the agenda,
which is
it
a pretty
is
dramatic decline, but an
page
increase in the
14.
percentage of sustained
right at the bottom.
complaints. And so I wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about whether there have been changes in internal procedure or changes in culture internally or externally.
That's a good
that sort of
call.
may account for these different trends where we've got, a pretty dramatic decrease in the number of allegations and very dramatic increase in sustained findings.
Sure. So in 2023, you see listed there's 22 complaints, and each complaint can contain multiple allegations. But if you look at the number, it's like a math problem. It's 22 complaints. If you have
Wait, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm seeing 54 complaints and 23 of them sustained. Am I reading that incorrectly?
there are 54 allegations altogether.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So when the number of allegations goes down, that will cause the percentage, if there's a small amount sustained, for the number to go up. It'll be a bigger number. So I don't know if I'm explaining that right. Like if you have 100 complaints, right, and 10 of them are sustained, then it's only going to be 10% that's sustained. But if we only have 10 complaints and 3 of them are sustained, and it's going to be a bigger number, 30%.
Interesting. I
Well,
hadn't
sure, but still, I mean, percentages are
heard
way of
anything about
comparing
that
across different numbers.
specifically.
So we have a
when
much
you say
higher
targeting,
percentage of those complaints which are
what does that
received
entail?
are sustained. And it's a dramatic change. I mean, it's gone from 3% in 2017, still in the single digits until 2021, then just in the low teens in the last 2 years, and now it's up almost 43%. So that's a pretty dramatic change in whether it's 10 cases or 100 cases that you receive, the percentage of those that it's founded is dramatically larger.
Right. So I'd have to say the same answer as last time, is that we just had the evidence to sustain those findings. There's nothing I can point to that would
Yeah, we just got called
wasn't
on
a
it.
culture.
So we started actually substantiating these
anything
allegations.
mind-boggling. Just we had the evidence.
Chief, I saw you.
If I can jump into the chair, we also have the body cameras now, and that helps out tremendously both ways. A lot of people will not file a complaint because when we bring forth that we do have it on camera, that complaint seems to get withdrawn. But on the other side, we also have evidence that we can either affirmatively say that it happened or it didn't.
That makes a great deal of sense. So could I ask a follow-up question about that? One of the things that I noticed in the police equity audit, one of the things they pointed out was that there was, I want to see if I can find it quickly. They said that some members of the community expressed concerns about the complaint investigations process, and they felt unsure about the fairness and the equity investigations. And they talked about the fact that the local defense bar thought there was a lack of transparency. And so based on that, I want to ask some questions. If you can help us and help the public, more importantly, understand more about the investigations process. So what kind of information do you get? What is the standard of proof? How long does the investigation take place? All those sorts of things. It's one of the reasons why we've asked for the investigation reports, and I want to follow up on that as well, because it doesn't seem like we've received those as yet. But if you could help us understand the investigations process so that we create more transparency. The body worn camera comment is very helpful, so thank you.
Sure. Well, when a complaint comes in, we're going to go out and look for all the evidence that we can get, whether it's a surveillance video, body worn camera video, any witness statements. We interview the victim. We also interview the officers, everyone involved in this incident. Once that's done, we'll compile a report, which includes an analysis and a summary, and then we forward it to the chief for his review. Once he makes his decision, then the case will be considered completed. Once it's completed, then it's open to a public records request, but not until then. And we try to get it done within 90 days, but sometimes there's extenuating circumstances that may cause
just
it to go
noticed in this
further. I think that's pretty much it on the process.
Can
you talk a little bit about the standard of proof? I know it's not a
Bob's
court
report
proceeding,
spreadsheet.
but
There is
still,
a
I mean,
complaint
are you
an
looking
officer
for
filed
more
against
probable
Stephen
than not? Are
Sargent.
you, I mean, what? Is
Sure,
this
there's a story
a
there.
49, 51% type of thing? What is the standard?
Yes, it's 51%, and if the chief decides that it's 51% or more and he feels strong enough about it, then he can sustain the finding.
I can't see, sorry. I apologize. I couldn't see through my glasses. There was too much dirt on them. So, yes, please, Commissioner Feldman.
I had a question about, you forwarded to us a report from September 12th, 2022, where an officer was using a car that he was given, but he wasn't using it while on duty. And he said somehow late at night on a Friday night, early Saturday morning, that he tried to avoid some sort of crossing thing, ran into a phone pole or some sort of electrical thing, blocked out the electricity from that neighborhood, and that he was suspended for 3 days from duty. And I was wondering, what goes into deciding whether that suspension is going to be a paid or an unpaid suspension? I can give you the name if you want it, if you need it. I'm just trying to avoid that unless you don't know what I'm talking about.
Through the chair, I know the name. A lot of it has to do with progressive discipline. So if you've been involved in something before or you haven't, that's the way we like to dish out our discipline, just like any other occupation. So if you have no complaints, you got in trouble, depending on what it is. So it's not, it not only fits the individual, but the actual allegation or complaint. If it gets to the point where it's that we believe it should be not paid, if there's an allegation of a criminal offense, right, they would be on administrative leave with pay pending the criminal investigation. So this wasn't criminal in nature. It was a instance where the officer did not use his discretion correctly, and he ended up getting a 3-day suspension.
So that was probably paid then, is how that played out?
No, that was not paid.
That was not paid.
Correct.
So under the progressive theory, that might not have been the first time this officer had a problem?
Through the chair, it also depends on the offense.
I had a question about another incident, if I could. On March 29th, there was a citizen complaint regarding police officer Simone that I didn't know what, I'm sorry, the 1713 was transporting civilians. I didn't know what the 1712.1, that wasn't listed or I didn't see it.
Correct. I corrected that today. And
Oh,
I found it today and I sent the correction over. It is departmental, 1712.1 is departmental vehicles.
okay. And can you talk a little bit about that incident? I know that one of the things that's been an issue of concern in at least other police departments, if not here, has been the transport of residents. So can you tell us a little bit more about that incident and about the discipline that was imposed?
Also interesting, there's one termination here.
Sure.
Castro Fernando.
The officer during his shift was in a marked cruiser.
Sustained and he was terminated.
He had given a citizen a ride to a CVS when he didn't get permission from his supervisor. And therefore, you know, we have to get permission. A lot of times, especially if it's a female, then we're going to want someone to follow behind the officer, just for, you know, any liability purposes and things of that nature. So in regard to his discipline, 3 days extra duty, that means that he has to come to work on his days off. So it's essentially a suspension. So he doesn't get paid for that.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. I also had a question about a use of force or unnecessary force complaint that was filed on 4/14 by the Shrewsbury Police Department. If you could talk to us about that incident, please.
I'm sorry, you said unnecessary force?
That's what I saw, yes. 15031. Maybe I read that wrong. 1502 and 1514. Oh, it's criminal conduct and conduct unbecoming. I read that incorrectly. My apologies. But criminal conduct complaint filed by the Shrewsbury Police Department.
Sure, there was an officer off duty. He was found in the parking lot in Shrewsbury, and he appeared to be intoxicated. There was an open can of beer also in his vehicle. So the Shrewsbury PD did arrest him, and it did go to court. It was dismissed, but he did.
Oh, you don't say.
5 days extra duty regarding that incident.
Okay, thank you so much.
That's hilarious.
And then there was a body-worn camera.
If you're a cop, you don't
there's
get
a use of
DUIs.
force
You get dismissed, and then you have to just
on
work 5 days unpaid.
1017
It's a good deal.
involving police officer Mojica.
Sure, what would you like to know?
Anything about when a use of force complaint, we're going to have questions about it.
He was involved in a foot chase of an individual that had a warrant. So he went after her. When he caught up to her, well, he didn't quite catch up to her, but he deployed his taser, and he deployed it at an inappropriate time. So because the person was fleeing, so that wasn't the time to use it. So it's a violation of our policy. So he was given that suspension.
Okay.
5 days.
I have to say, your mastery of this material, being able to remember all of these cases from memory is quite impressive. I just also had a question about the body-worn camera complaints on 12.8 and 12.6. Again, given the role that we played in introduction of the body-worn camera role and the fact that they're so new, if you could tell us about those two complaints, that would be helpful. It's involving police officer Martin and involved the termination of police officer Fernando, two different incidents.
Oh, okay.
Okay, in regard to Officer Martin, with the body worn cameras, you're supposed to dock them each time you come in and upload the videos to Axon Evidence. And he was not doing that over a several day period. And so therefore, he was issued discipline regarding that, a written reprimand. And then.
So did the video get uploaded, or did he just take the reprimand because
Castro Fernando,
something on there wasn't good? You know,
he was a fairly new employee, still on probation, and a lot of the calls that he went to, he wasn't showing his mastery of command presence or just controlling the scene. He would actually, he was somewhat of a liability to other officers there. So we felt it was in our best interest as a department and city to terminate his position.
I'm sure that's a hard choice, particularly given how much goes into recruitment. So thank you.
he washed out.
Do other commissioners have questions about specific incidents from this chart?
Through the chair, Robert Bellata has a question.
Robert, please.
The question I had was, well, the police officer Santino Simone. I was just curious. It showed that there were a few allegations. Was that all for the one incident? Just to clarify, I was a little confused by that. Right, I know just there were a few other names that had a few other, like, more than one.
Yeah, the cop language there of like not having a mastery of the
all related to
scene.
one
Yeah,
incident.
like
Just
he's being too soft on him.
I'm sorry, which case are you referring to? Which complaint?
So I'm looking on the spreadsheet number 9, PO Santino Simone. And I just noticed that there was it's like 14.1, 1712.1, 1608.1. Are those all just within related to one incident, just for my own clarification?
Yes, that's all related to one incident.
That's how they all work. Okay. Thank you.
I had a question. So if I am reading this correctly, was there just 2 complaints about unnecessary force in all of 2023?
I know there was 4 allegations. I believe it was 2 complaints. There were 4 allegations altogether, but I think one had a few allegations within one complaint. Yes.
Okay, so, obviously, given the amount of interactions that the police department has, 2 is too many, but on the other hand, that's a very impressive number. That
Thank
it's
you.
only 2. I just wanted to ask you, beyond what the chief said about the body cameras changing things significantly, what consideration do you give to the fact that some people may be afraid to make allegations or complaints, because they don't want to have ongoing interaction with the police department that would go poorly on their behalf? So I'm sure that there's a human nature element involved about this is a pretty serious thing when you make a complaint or an allegation against the police. I'm sure you've given some consideration to making sure that that isn't the motivating force that drives whether or not somebody makes the complaint. How do you handle those kind of situations?
Well, one way is that we allow for anonymous complaints. Also, we do audits and reviews of body-worn camera footage monthly. Not only does my office do it, but there's other supervisors from the different units within the police department that will have randomly selected videos sent to them for them to review. So if we do see something there that needs to be addressed, then we go ahead and address it.
While we're talking about use of force, if I could sort of go over to that data, I did have one question. I was having trouble following. There was a discrepancy to my eyes between the Excel data that you sent us and then the data that was in the Word document. So well, at least it looks like it came from
Take care,
Excel.
dude.
The
Thanks for hanging
Excel
out.
chart seemed to indicate that there was a display of a taser 93 times and a use 2 times, whereas the chart that was in the Word document seemed to indicate that there was a display 2 times and there was a use 18 times. So I was just a little confused about how to reconcile that data.
They're like, so are we. I didn't quite follow what she's saying, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that. I don't know why these are different.
Okay. Yeah, if you can get back to us on that, that would be great. Particularly because the display of 93 times was much higher than any prior year. So just again, if you get back to us about what the numbers are and then help us to understand if they are that discrepant, why that might be.
Sure.
Thank you. I did note that we had asked for the investigation reports for the complaints. Can you give us an update on when we can expect those?
The investigative reports from all these,
Yes.
they were sent to the law department, so I'm just waiting on them to finish any redactions that they need to make.
Great. Okay. So Vic, can we just turn to you to stay on top of that for us?
Sure.
That'd be great. Thank you so much. Also, we asked a question again in this same realm about early intervention trigger reports. Charlie and Liz and I were all very fortunate to participate in the Police Citizens Academy. And one of the things we learned about during the course of those presentations was that, at least as I understand it, if there are 3 or more citizen complaints, it triggers an early intervention report. It wasn't clear to me if it was 3 or more complaints against a particular officer in a year or in a longer period of time. So if you could help us understand what leads to those triggers, and then walk us through how those reports, if those any reports were generated this year, how often reports tend to be generated, if those are reports that we can get our eyes on.
Sure. The early intervention screening system will trigger under some set parameters. One being like what you mentioned, 3 complaints within a 6-month period, or 5 complaints within a year, 12-month period. So other ways it can trigger is if the same officer has a number of injured prisoners, 3 injured prisoners within a 6-month period, and also the 5 within a 12-month period. We have since changed the policy, the way we enter the stuff into the system regarding injured prisoners, because we used to enter prior injuries. So when I say prior injuries, it's the individual who was arrested had an injury prior to the arrest, and nothing to our doing. So what was happening is when we did enter those, it would cause a trigger to happen on a lot of officers. And so then we're having to review a lot of reports. And in turn, there was never anything that was any fault of the officer. So we decided that we're going to remove the prior to, but still keep the injured during and injured after on there. And so therefore, we're getting a lot less triggers regarding that. Now, normally what we do is once we get those triggers, I'll review it.
Hot dog.
The officers come
Coney
in,
Island
will
tonight.
review it. The deputy
Rest
chief,
Stream Boys
and the
asked me to
chief,
encourage
then
you all to come
we'll
out
see if
to
there's any
that.
training that
I'm
needs
gonna try to make it down
had or
myself,
anything like
but
that,
we'll see.
as a result
And
of it. Or
I
if
haven't
it's
been to one of these
very
before, but I heard
egregious,
it's very fun. That's 8
incident
p.m.
where he violated
at
the chief violated
Coney
the
Island.
policy, then there may be discipline that's warranted.
Is there some sort of wheel that gets spun?
Now, we did have an intervention, but it wasn't through the triggers. I just happened to notice a report that's within the triggers in that system, and it was just a matter of better defensive tactics for this officer because he was getting injured during an arrest, and I noticed a thing or two in there that there's no way this should have happened to him. So he went through some training.
And were there other early intervention trigger reports this year other than that one?
No, there were several but they include a lot of medical paperwork, a lot of HIPAA type stuff. So I sent that to the law department, and they're trying to make a decision on whether to release those or not.
Okay. So then again, I would just ask Vic if you could follow up on that as well.
And I was, excuse me, I'm sorry, through chair. I was just able to finish getting those together today, so the law department just got them today.
Well, I really appreciate you getting them together, so thank you. And I know that's a new request, so it makes sense that you wouldn't have had them before. So before we move on to hate crimes, do any of the commissioners have other questions about the BOPS data? Or Captain Davenport, are there other things you want to draw, make sure that we get eyes on, or that you think is significant for us to review with you?
I think you had a question about 31. Question 31, is that it?
Yes, thank you. So question 31 was,
Question 31.
we understand that there is a somewhat new relationship and protocol as it relates to how BOPS does investigations versus how the Office of Human Rights and Accessibility, the Division of Investigation there. So if you could talk to us about what, if anything, is changing and how that relationship will impact investigations moving forward.
So in regard to the equity officer in the Department of Equity and Inclusion, we decided that, when I say we, the city manager, chief, and whoever else was involved during that meeting, along with the human resources director, William Bagley, decided that the equity officer will be involved, the chief equity officer from City Hall, who we've yet to hire, I guess, but we're working on it, will be involved in this investigation process when it comes to decision-making at the end. But the change for our department is where we normally do all the investigations. The lead investigator from Human Resources Division will handle the investigations delineated here in question 31, which is policy and procedures of bias-free policing and profiling, sexual harassment, any violation of that, any harassment of individuals in protected classes. So things of that nature, they will be the lead investigators on it, and we'll be like a liaison to them, assist them in any way that we can. And there'll be one investigative report done by the lead investigator or whoever the investigator is handling it from human resources.
And then that's the report that'll then get forwarded to post, because all the post protocols will still need to be followed, I take it.
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's very helpful. Do other commissioners have questions about that? Yes, Chief.
I just want to reiterate on something that the men and women of the Worcester Police Department and Commissioner Feldman brought it up. 2,770 arrests. There were 4 complaint allegations of unnecessary force. That also entails 128,557 incidents. And if you look at the percentages there, I know you're saying, well, maybe not everybody's, we're reaching out to the community. We do the community meetings. We have, as Captain Davenport said, the online method of filing complaints, which is many. But I think the most important thing is that we do police ourselves by having these audits. There's many times Captain Davenport will call me and say, we need to look at this video. And then we'll make a decision right there and then go through the chain of command with everything. So I just want to let the men and women of the Worcester Police Department and the city of Worcester know that these guys and girls are doing an outstanding job. One of the people you mentioned, I'm not going to say the name, that guy was involved in a violent altercation Sunday where he almost got his ear torn off. So these officers are out there doing the job, and I want to thank them for that.
Well, we echo those thanks. So
thank you.
Thank you for
Appreciate it.
mentioning that. I did see that article in the paper about the most recent incident. So I want to, Officer Davenport, unless there's anything else on that data, I want to move to the hate crimes. Is that but I want to make sure I'm not cutting you off.
You're more than welcome to move on to the hate crimes. Thank you.
Okay, so are you presenting on the hate crimes as well? No, okay. So on the hate crimes, I noticed that last year we had 17 incidents and this year only 2. I didn't know who was going to present on the hate crimes today. Gentlemen?
To the chair, I will on that. As far as the question goes, the 2 answers.
Let's get to the hate crimes,
As far as
folks.
reporting goes, we weren't able to have any redactions done. That's why those reports weren't forwarded. As far as 17 incidents compared to 2, I do not have that. That was not in the question, but I will get that for you.
No, I think that's just a statement of fact. Last year you told us there were 17, and now this year you're telling us there were 2. So I'm just comparing that. I went back and looked at the data. So that's a pretty dramatic drop. And if Vic, I can just add to your list to follow up with the city solicitor's office to get the reports that you all have forwarded. That would be great. And thank you for forwarding those.
To the chair, one other item that comes forward is the hate crime definition is different between us and the NIBRS reports. So I'm not sure if something happened with that, but we will get you that answer.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And just to remind the commissioners, we had questions that
No
we
more
had
hate
to the police
crimes.
previously, where there was an apparent discrepancy in the number of hate crimes last year, as was reported to the FBI versus what WPD shared with us. And they had gotten back to us and said there was a difference in definitions, and that's the information the chief is referencing, just so everyone's on the same page. Okay, so I think if there are no more questions on that, I'd like to move us on to the next group, sort of chunk of information, which is about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and particularly around the composition of the police force. I know this has been an issue that received a lot of attention in the race equity audit. And you all have provided us with a great deal of information about the recruitment efforts
Where
that
are we? This
you
is
did this year. By
question
my review
4.
of the data, just to share with the other commissioners in case they didn't have a chance to look at it, it looks like out of the 29 new recruits to the police force, 24% were women and 24% were women. The remainder were men. There were 37.5% of the new recruits were Hispanics, 43.8% were white, 3% were Black, 9% Asian, and 6% Middle Eastern. Which just raises a question about, oh no, I'm sorry. Those were for Worcester, QCC, and Auburn. But if you look just at Worcester, actually there were no new Black recruits. And the other numbers were fairly similar. So I didn't know if you could talk to us. And the race equity audit talked a great deal about the fact that the police force really is not reflective of the demographics of the city. I know that you've done a great deal of outreach, but it obviously is troubling that of the incoming class, there are no Black new recruits. If you could talk to us about what you're hoping to do moving forward to continue to move the department to be more reflective.
No problem, through the chair. You also have to remember that a lot of these demographics are done voluntarily through the department. So if someone, for example, chooses not to put down that their race, that also will reflect on these demographics. So we've had these issues in the past when we've been asked about the the demographics in regards to we don't have one black recruit or number of females. That is on a voluntary basis. So a lot of what you've seen on the demographics there, that was all done voluntarily. So that being said, what we're doing going forward with getting those numbers up, and as you can see on some of the lists that we put down in bulletin form, not only working with community stakeholders, we've been working with Black Families Worcester, and talking to Mr. Fred Taylor in regards to getting out into the community and getting the perceptions of the positive perceptions of the police department, so
Pretty
we
whack.
can have these young men and women take the entry exam. And the numbers have actually gone up. In talking to civil service, I've spoken to them several times, and the numbers have gone up from, I think, 118 last year to 237. I know it's a big number, but that's a pretty significant increase, I think. So
That's
with
the number of people who took the exam or the number of Black candidates for the exam?
the number of people that are taking the exam. And
And
like I
what-
said, that's all voluntary. So we don't even know. And I'll give you an example. We have officers on the job that do not choose to put down what race they are. And that's strictly voluntarily. If we had one fee, and we also get into the aspect of mixed race as well. We have officers that are Hispanic and Black, white and Black. So if they choose to put white or they choose to put Black, that's their prerogative. So we don't have a say on that. And that kind of hurts when we have to show something demographics, but unfortunately that's just the system that we have. So we can't actually ask those questions and demand those questions to say, what race are you? If they choose to put down what race they are or leave it blank, like a lot of the candidates do, then that's what we have to go by, unfortunately, if that makes any sense.
But that doesn't really answer the question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, she's like,
So-
sure.
One thing that
Gotta love it.
I know
Gotta love it,
that
folks.
we'd asked in the past for the civil service exam passage rates. We had data from last year that you all had given us. Actually, Casey handed to me at the Civilian Academy. So again, thanks for all of you being on top of this. But that showed that the passage rate for Black African American candidates, Black or African American candidates was in the low 40s as compared to Hispanic or Latino men close to 80 and white men around 75. Given the fact that, and I know the numbers aren't absolute because of the reasons you talked about, but given the fact that there does seem to be trouble recruiting Black candidates, can you talk about any thoughts you have or efforts you're making to move away from the civil service exam?
Oh, this is interesting.
To the chair, that's a big undertaking when you're considering 500 employees as far as civil service police officers. There's over 100 in the officials ranks. And for the city of Worcester to take that on and actually do the whole process would be very difficult. When you see departments leaving civil service, it's mostly a smaller agency with a few officers where they do their own thing anyway. So as far as us having our own exam, we already do our own backgrounds. Going through that whole process would be very, very difficult to do. And again, that's not the police department's voice. We follow the rules with what we have. Right now, we have civil service. So when you
It
get
would be
into
very, very difficult to do
promotionals
because of
and all
the
that,
police
again,
union.
there's a lot of misconception out there that we're not promoting people of color for whatever reason. When you look at the data, we go by a civil service list of the top 3. So if us 3 right here are the top and there's only one job, it's going to go to me. Unfortunately, it wouldn't go to Angel because there's no other jobs there's no way around that because that is the civil service law according to Mass General Law.
But that, with respect, that really is the question. If the civil service exam is racially biased, then by definition, you're not going to be able to promote people of color in the department because of the strict rules that are based on the civil service exam numbers. So if you're bound by civil service, you're going to continue to have problems, to have promotions that are not only reflective of the population, but arguably reflective of ability. There was some discussion in the police equity audit that there was a feeling among those interviewed, among
Yeah,
the police
the-
force,
The
that promotions being
response to
based
the
on
equity
civil
audit was
service
to
weren't
remove the chief and
reflective
deputy chief from
of
civil service, but the
person
rest of
who
the
was most
department
qualified. So
is still
I guess my question
on
is,
the
I
civil service
understand that
system.
there are barriers because to come up with a different test would indeed be cumbersome, but it's also a huge priority to ensure that the police department is both equitable in its hiring, equitable in its promotions, and reflective of the community. So this is not a criticism, this is a request for conversation about how do we go about addressing that problem. There's a barrier in terms of the burden on you all of coming up with an alternate system, but the current system seems on its face, based on the numbers, but also qualitatively based on the interviews that are reported in the police equity report, the race equity report, to be somewhat problematic.
To the chair, that's correct, and that's why the city manager's taken it amongst himself to remove the chief and deputy chief out of civil service. What happens to the lower ranks after that, I do not know. But civil service system itself is in the process of adjusting what they're doing. Matter of fact, they took one sergeant lieutenant exam and threw the whole thing out after the officers took it, and came back with a different system where points would be highlighted at a different rate for experience versus just grade. So that's the new test that just come out. So they are making
Welcome, man.
adjustments.
That was, if I'm correct, that was in the wake of a civil rights lawsuit. Is that correct?
To the chair, that's correct.
Okay, I wanted to add a little bit more after reading the CNA, the Center for Naval Analysis audit. They said that consideration should be given to removing the civil service exam for hiring and promotion. They found that the civil service process has been controversial as promotions are based on a multiple choice test that white officers historically perform better than officers from communities of color in spite of last year's statistics. And further, that individuals of many races and ethnicities oftentimes perform their job in an exemplary fashion, even though they don't do well on written exams. The Center for Naval Analysis Equity Audit pointed out that the Worcester Police Department is more than 80% white, and that the recruitment of the diverse workforce has proved inadequate, as 90% of captains and sergeants are white. 95% of lieutenants are white, while roughly 40% of the residents of Worcester are people of color. Framingham, Marlborough, and Webster have all exited the civil service completely. And for only 281 Worcester residents, I think the figure given was 237 Worcester residents, took the civil service exam this past time, which is one of the lowest in recorded history. So, you know, I myself think that this is a major, major issue for recruitment. I myself think that this is not a way to balance the police department to look like the city that it serves. And I believe that it is actually not the most appropriate way to get the best police force. I think the practical application of policing is a much better way to do promotions than a written exam in many, many cases. And the equitable disadvantage it gives certain people is also of tremendous significance. So I myself want to offer a motion for us on the commission. And the motion would be that the City of Worcester Human Rights Commission request the city manager withdraw from requiring the use of civil service exams and use by the Worcester Police Department in its hiring and promotion practices.
So before I call for a vote on that, I want to recognize, I have an opportunity for discussion, and I see that Commissioner Bellotta has raised his hand. No? Okay.
Mayor, to the chair.
Yes.
Just may I just say that, and I've heard what the chief was saying about the department with 500 officers, including top brass and the police department, police officers themselves. And if that be the case, when I look at the equity report, why would they make that recommendation to recruit more officers of color and make a recommendation that they would withdraw from the civil service exam if they knew what you're saying, that this is a large department, it becomes and I know it takes time, to move, a cruise ship. So, you can't move it on a dime. But I just want to know, just with my understanding, if that be the case, that they already knew that the comments, the cost, the financial cost, and what have you, why would they even mention it if that be the case without looking at it? And I just say this also, that have the police department ever looked at it, thoroughly from different perspectives. But I said the last time we talked is, I understand that you took the civil service exam, has been really good and it's mostly equitable. But the question in my mind that of a large police departments around the country have, even with the staff that we have here, the second largest, city within New England, and Boston considering and what have you. I just want to know, again, the bottom line, why do you think that the CNA would make that even recommendation, knowing the size of the police department?
To the chair, to the commissioner. There's a couple things at stake here. Number one, they made that recommendation. They also made the recommendation that we should take officials from other departments and put them in the Worcester PD to diversify. Again, civil service, we can't do that. So what's looking like the police department is not trying to diversify is wrong. The system has problems, absolutely. And if they want to change it, I'm good with that. But don't put it on the Worcester Police that we're not trying to diversify, because we're doing everything we can. We're doing what we can within the rules set right now. So I applaud your amendment, or how you want to pass that. And we'll work with whatever rules we have. But within those guidelines, civil service came to Worcester, Mass in 1890. So now you know what you're talking about, right? 1890, that was established for the city of Worcester. We cannot take police officers from other departments. That's strictly forbidden. And again, the city has any captain's promotion now, it's assessment center. It's not pencil and paper. So you actually go in front of a board, could be a 2-day exam where you put in scenarios. So they have taken steps to change the current system, although that assessment center is still within civil service.
And to the chair, and I really commend you on that. And as long as the process is in place,
He's like, yeah,
you
take
adhere
it up
to
to
that.
city
I have no
manager.
problem with that, because I'll do the same thing. But I'm just trying to say that if the CNA made that recommendation, that they withdraw, and if the police department just would look in there and do some research on it and get empirical data and best practice, that will be able to make it more feasible that most people of color can have probably a course on it. But as it stands now, I'm with you 100%. You have to abide by those laws. But I'm trying to say, what if we just look at it from a different perspective? That's all I'm saying.
And the motion is directed at the city itself, not at the police department, to give the police department the ability to not search for people only under the current exam system.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner O'Callaghan. Oh, I'm sorry. Liz, can I ask you to hold, because one of the officers, and I didn't catch your name at the beginning. Is it Murphy?
Through the chair, Sean Murtha, yes.
Thank you.
I just have some data. I think there's some good news here. Following up on what Sergeant Miranda said. you're talking about the difficulties in recruiting officers of color, especially Black officers. And the 2022 exam that resulted in this class, 117 people took that exam. This latest one, speaking of the good work they're doing with recruitment, we have 237 applicants, and of them, 52 identified as Black. That's 22% of the applicants, which is a huge increase from last time. Last time we had 16 total. Now we have 52. That's a much bigger pool. In addition, we have 86 Latino applicants, 36% of the total, 22% Black, 36% Latino. About 20% of the total are female also. So it looks like, through the current hiring system, the 2024 numbers are looking much better for diversity than the 2022 numbers. So, we do have a background process and everything, but it's much better beginning to have those kind of numbers. I just wanted to share that data.
Those numbers are very impressive. And if we could get those numbers in writing, that would be really helpful. I think it does go to the conversation that the commissioners were just having with the chief, which is that you guys are working hard in terms of outreach and recruitment to diversify. But if the civil service exam itself is inherently racially biased, then it's working against you. And so that's why I believe the commissioner raised this motion, which is to move away from a system which in effect is working against the outreach and recruitment efforts that you're making.
Officer Murtha, I just wanted to ask you, is that how many people took the exam? That's not how many people passed the exam. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct. This is the number of people who took the exam. Angela, I don't think, have we got the results back yet in terms of the passing? Okay, no results yet? Sure.
Through the chair, excuse me, sorry about
okay.
that, LT. The raw scores are out right now. I just spoke to civil service like 3 weeks ago. So once that list is solidified and the appeals process that everyone is afforded, once that list comes out, we'll get that list probably the end of May, hopefully the beginning of June.
Great.
So we're looking at that. And also to add, in speaking with civil service, there is a bill in legislation as we speak. So in order to change the hiring process, in Worcester, we're looking at 3 options. And I don't want to misspeak because I don't know the particulars yet. But in speaking with civil service, they did mention that going forward, they will come and sit with us individually, with the bigger police departments and see what our best options are going forward in order for especially with the entry exam and how they're gonna go forward in putting out hiring. So, like I said, I don't want to misspeak, but as soon as they have that information, they're going to get that out to us, and then we can be able to share that.
That's great. Thank you. I want to recognize Commissioner O'Callaghan, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I know this is from a while back, but wanted to commit all the efforts and recognize that this is a matter of tremendous effort and resources. It sounds like it's going to take to replace a civil service exam. And so recognizing that without the support of the manager and the changes that need to happen and the resources that you need to do that your hands are really tied, and recognizing that it is despite the tremendous effort you've gone through, that there is this struggle, and it is a systemic issue, and we're hoping that we can perhaps remove this barrier for you. And so I just wanted to express support for Commissioner Feldman's motion.
Thank you. Commissioner Bellotta?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what a few of the other commissioners were saying. I think the police department has really done an excellent job with doing more outreach and work connecting with community groups. And I see WPD at different events, and I know the diversity officers are really working hard, and the whole department is. And I think I've really seen that in recent years. However, we know that it is such like a long-standing and institutional and systemic challenge, and police departments over the country are facing that. But I think it is important to note that I think WPD is making solid efforts, and we're starting to see some results. I was just curious because part of it from the audit, some things that it mentioned were maybe helping expand recruitment efforts by like doing more. So just one thing I'll read, it said in revising its recruitment plan, WPD may want to engage with small working groups that include representatives from other city departments, local colleges, community organizations, or since I guess, and this is getting to my question, is since the the equity audit has come out, are there, have there been changes made to recruiting? Because I think, before we get to improving the diversity of promotions, we got to get more people in the door, at the department. And I think, again, the Worcester PD is doing really a great job with doing that. I was just curious, are there more efforts now to create some type of a more long-term plan with short-term goals? Or is it kind of just taking a look at what you are already doing and trying to reform that? I'm just curious if there's any changes being made to connecting with local communities and connecting with local groups, doing things like internship programs or other things like that. Just curious.
Absolutely, through the chair. We have begun, ever since the equity came out, we've already begun to adapt new ways of recruiting. Officer Onigbo, who's not here today, and I have at least 20 officers in the police department, several from the Ghanaian community. They have, for example, they have gone out to that community itself. They've actually been on YouTube. They've been interviewed, and they've spoken to that community per se. I also have the Asian community as well. We have officers in the department that work with us in recruiting in that community, as well as Hispanics, and then we're trying to get women in, women as well. But that being said, we're out there in social media. We're getting out there with Lieutenant Murtha. We're trying to get the message across. We've been interviewed by several news stations in order to recruit, and those are some of just the examples that we've had done ever since the equity, and we're looking to expand going forward. So, like we said, our hands are a little tight. We have to abide by the laws, but we're doing what every little bit we can through our department to just get that word out there through the community with the stakeholders that we're working with.
And may I say to the chair, I have a personal relationship with Sergeant Medina, and he would be a police officer since he was knee-high to a duck in Great Brook Valley, playing handball with police as they come down there. That was a great recruitment. And even at Doherty, I felt safe when he was there. He was a role model, and people looked up to him. He had the character. You know what I'm saying? Every once in a while, he look at me and say, "All right, Dr. Reese, let's take it to the handball court." Great recruit. And may I commend you, Captain Davenport, with your excellent presentation. I really was sit here in awe at you. And I want to say, remind me to raise your salary.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask,
Thank you.
Commissioner Feldman has made a motion. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a second. Is there further discussion? Okay, let's do a roll call vote.
Ellen Shemitz,
Aye.
Liz O'Callahan,
Aye.
Robert Bellata,
I apologize.
Randy Feldman,
Aye.
Charles Hopkins,
Aye.
Bernard Reese,
Aye.
Jacqueline Yang.
Aye.
Motion's approved.
Thank you. So Chief, I do have a question for you. If the
Ball's in
city
your court,
manager
Eric.
were to, so we're going to forward him, a motion with the policy recommendation to move away from the civil service exam. If he were open to that, is that something you would support, embrace, or be cautious about?
To the chair, we would support it, and I have spoken with the manager about it. Again, it's logistics, getting that all together, and again, you have to go to the State House, drop civil service. It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, okay.
To the chair, also, I pastor in Framingham, and I know Chief Baker well. And when that motion was put on the city selectmen, it took about 5 years to get it done. It's a monumental task. Also, plus the financial barrier that's going to hit on the city because they have to pay for all of the
Correct.
The recruits that's taking the exam, and they
Right.
got to find a place in time. So I understand the comments that you have also through my research when I was on the diversity and inclusion committee, and I got a lot of information from Officer Medina was in Darting, and he gave me all his spiel and what have you. But yet and still, it's the police union, everything, the city, the state. It's a monumental task.
Understood. So before,
Through the chair, I just have a question. I know you guys came a few years back, and there was one African-American female working for the department. Do you know what the numbers are today?
just to help you, the numbers that you gave us disaggregate by race or gender, but not by both. So that's why I believe the commissioner is asking that question. We can't answer it from the data you provided.
And I know at the time you had two, but one had retired.
What I'm going to suggest is if you, no problem if you can't answer it now, if that's one of the things you'd get back to us with, that would be helpful.
Through the chair, I know right now we have one, and that's one female officer that's Black right now, for a fact. Once this class graduates, the numbers are going to change. We do have female officers of color in that class. So once that class graduates, the demographics going to change.
Okay.
I'll reach out to HR and be more than glad to have that for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I do have another question on the same topic. We asked you about this. One of the things that jumped out at me during the Police Civilian Academy was the discussion of the background check that happens after passage of the civil service exam. And we wanted to get information on the differential in passage of the background check by race, gender, and ethnicity. Background checks by definition can be somewhat subjective. And so I think it's important to know if there does seem to be any discrepancy in those passage rates.
To the chair, we do not have that. And the follow-up question is, what are the rates for passing the academy? Since the academy is not completed, we cannot give you that right now. They still
No,
have-
I mean, looking backwards. So every year, as I understand it, you have to take the civil service exam, then you go through the academy, and then there's the background check. And I'm looking for demographics on passage rate of that background check. Is there a differential based on race, gender, ethnicity on people who do not pass that test?
To the chair, that request went out and I did not receive it at the time of this meeting. So we can follow up with that as well.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Vic if you could follow up with the police department to get that data, because I do think that's an important question. We don't want to ask you guys questions and just for the sake of generating data, but that is a potential point of subjectivity where I think it's important to look if there's anything going on there. So we'll get that, and I thank you for that. The only other question in this section has to do with something arguably softer. One of the comments in the race equity audit was concerns about police comments in social media. And something that I observed and
This is an
spoke
interesting
about
one.
briefly during the police academy was that one of the officers who came and spoke with us was in his informal attire that I guess he's a plainclothes police officer. And his attire included a Black Lives Matter flag. Strike that. A Blue Lives Matter flag. Thank you, commissioners. Which I think is somewhat problematic in terms of a police officer with the weight of the law who's wearing a logo that carries a message and arguably a message of exclusion. And I'm wondering what policies, and this was in our written questions, but I don't believe it was answered. What questions, limitations, if any, do you have on social media posting, on displays of logos, whether in words or images that reflect a certain political and or racial message?
To the chair, officers have a First Amendment right as well as every other citizen. As far as the thin blue line flag, that originated in the 90s, and it's to commemorate officers killed in the line of duty, officers injured. Last week, North Carolina, 8 officers got shot, 4 got killed. That's what that flag's for. Some people say the alt-right may say it has to do with white supremacy. That's somebody's opinion. There's no valid stated fact that if I wear a thin blue line flag to commemorate officers killed in the line of duty, that I'm a racist. So I am not going to create a policy taking away somebody's First Amendment rights. I believe that officers should back each other up. As far as we go to a funeral, there will be 10,000 people at that funeral.
Sort
And
of,
that's what that flag, in my mind, represents.
I don't know.
So that's an opinion
that
based on
history
everybody.
on the
Whatever
blue line
political
flag is,
ideology
right?
you have,
Seems to
you
be
may
a
have a
fun-
different opinion.
Fun little
than me,
research rabbit hole.
but as far as I'm concerned, that's what I think it is.
Let me push back on that a little bit, because I've looked at the uniform requirements that you have in your policy and procedures, and they are detailed and minute and very restrictive and proscriptive about exactly what you have to wear, what can and cannot be displayed. Certainly not having anything on your uniform that is not specifically allowed and prescribed in that very detailed policy and procedure manual. So my question is, if you do that to make sure that when you all go out as officers, you are projecting a unified image and an image that is not offensive to the residents, why is it that those same restrictions that simply say you may not have anything on your plain clothes uniform that in any way could be deemed a political message? We can argue about what it's meant to say.
Yeah.
But that's really
Yeah,
not
that's
the
right.
issue. The issue is it is
Commissioner,
sending a
Delamere
message,
seems
and it's
to
not a
have
message that
really done her
a
homework.
uniformed police officer is allowed to wear. So why is it that someone who's not in uniform is free to wear that, despite the fact that there's significant literature out there that talks about how that image is perceived by the Black and brown community? It may not be how it's intended, but how it's perceived. And there are restrictions, very clear restrictions, that you impose on other officers.
To the chair, those restrictions have to do with uniform personnel. Everything on your uniform has to be standard. There's a, the stripe on my pants is a certain width. And that is to conform with discipline, esprit de corps. That all has to do with the uniform positioning. When you are in the vice squad, when you are in different plainclothes units, we have people out there that aren't supposed to look like a police officer. So they can wear different things. I don't know what you're referring to, what he had on that night, but whatever it was, he was in the academy. There's no regulations, there's no policy against that.
So let me ask you this. If we were to get an opinion from the city solicitor that just as you are able to have proscriptions and restrictions on uniform dress, so too there could be a uniform content neutral restriction on any image, logo, or statement that could be deemed to have political content, regardless of what that political content is, would you be comfortable issuing a policy that indeed imposes that restriction if there were not a First Amendment concern?
To the commissioner, I believe there is a First Amendment concern. If the city solicitor comes out and says we're against regulation, then we'll abide by it. But I do believe that is your First Amendment right to wear, especially in plain clothes, where you're trying to fit into the community. You're going wherever. You're undercover. If you're made
Fitting into the
cop,
community
now
was
this
some
isn't
blue
just
line
relate to
patch.
that situation. But you have to wear different things so that you're not made as a cop where you could get killed. So there are different prescribed uniform appearance that we have a policy on, but when it comes to plain clothes, we do not. When you're a detective, then it's business attire. You're doing interviews. You could be interviewing a rape victim. Do we want that person dressed in a hoodie? Absolutely not. That's the difference between, depending what division you actually work in.
Are there other comments or questions on this by the commissioners?
Just maybe if I can add some clarity. I don't remember which unit was there, but there were several officers who had an informal uniform. It's probably a more clear way to put it. And that there was a sweatshirt with the thin blue line flag on it that they had. And I don't know whether the police department buys that or if they buy them with their own money. But I just, maybe I could add some, maybe that helps clear up any confusion about what she's referring to.
Through the chair to the commissioner, that's correct. The same as the fire department has a thin red line. Construction workers have a thin green line. EMS has a different line. People can go online and buy anything they want. So it's not something, we're selling, saying you have to wear this.
So I guess I'd like to ask the other commissioners whether or not there would be interest in a motion to ask that the city manager ask the city solicitor to indicate whether or not there would be any First Amendment concerns about promulgating a police policy that any informal police uniform be subject to a policy and procedure that it not include any statements or logos that could be deemed political or in any way discriminatory against any race, gender, or ethnicity in the city.
I'll second that.
I prefer to table this, and I'll explain why. A lot has to go into this. I barely understand the difference between a thin blue line logo, which I understand what that means, and a Blue Lives Matter insignia. And the First Amendment rights would depend on where and how something is worn. I think that this is so fact dependent that we're better off, I think, moving on to other items and handling this ourselves to look at the minutiae and come up with a recommendation.
Any other discussion on that?
Yeah, in some ways, I certainly can see where you're coming from around the thin blue line flag. On the other hand, some of you may know, I was in Las Vegas 6 years ago, the night of the shooting. I was involved in treating people, and I wore a black ribbon for that at the end of that week because it was important for me to wear that. So
I hear you.
And to the chair, I just need some more information and research on that because this was just new to me, so I really can't. I'm neutral on this because I've not done any research on that.
Well, I really appreciate the discussion, both among the commissioners and with the chief. So thank you all. So let us go on. The next big group. Oh, before I move on, I was remiss. Captain Davenport, first of all, I realized at one point I said Officer Davenport, which is not cool, and I apologize for that. To use purely professional terminology, not cool. And the second thing is, I don't think I offered you an opportunity to let us know if there were other things you wanted to make sure that we were aware of in all the data that you shared with us.
It's no problem that you called me Officer Davenport. Technically, I am still an officer. No, everything that I want to share with you all is within the reports that I sent over. So, and again, I'll get to the bottom of why there's a discrepancy on the display of taser. I think what happened was we had added some more use of force categories. And when we did that, I think a couple of the categories got meshed together. So I'll straighten that out and I'll get it to you.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So let's move on to limited English proficiency. And you all
Yes, Facepalm, I am
provided,
indeed Jesus.
Um,
Jesus, I am Jesus.
I guess
I
it's
am indeed
question
Jesus.
6, 7, and 8 in the questions that we sent to you all. And I have a number of questions about your
All
responses,
right.
but
Question
maybe it would
6,
be
7,
most polite and
and
efficient
8.
to first ask you if you want to
Where
summarize those
are we?
responses, or if you want to entertain
6,
questions
7, and
based on
8
your written
all has to
responses.
do
How
with
would you like to handle this?
language and translators and such. Here's the
Through the chair, we'd certainly be willing to entertain any questions you may have about the specifics of the policy.
Okay. So I'm assuming that all the commissioners had a chance to look at it. I think what really jumped out at me is that, and I'll just read from the WPD responses in case you didn't have a chance. But they indicate that the department does not maintain a record of what languages the officers and officials speak. And there are no sworn police personnel within the department that are assigned as part of their official duties as interpreters. And let's start there. It raises real concerns for me. You all, I'm sure, are aware that one of the sort of high level findings of the racial equity audit was concerns in the interactions between officers and the LEP community. And you all gave us a revised draft of an LEP policy, and we provided you all through the city manager's office with a number of recommended changes in order to ensure that there was full communication and protection of the rights of LEP residents. And those included that interpretation be performed by individuals who have been assessed by a highly rigorous standardized instrument, and that there be qualified bilingual personnel who are available for interpretation, and that only those people be used for anything other than exigent circumstances translation. And so it seems that the response that you've provided actually heightens concerns that there is not going to be the level of professionalism and clarity and consistency in interactions between officers and the LEP community. And I know that Commissioner Yang did a pretty deep dive on the LEP policy issues. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I didn't know if you wanted to speak to some of that.
I didn't have my list. Do you have that?
I do have your list, yes.
it's really sort of incredible that the department doesn't have any. Jesus, allergies are bad right now.
In case you don't have it, this is the
The
material.
department
from the
doesn't have any
WPD,
like
starting
full-time
where I
or
highlighted
like
in blue.
standardized translators in the city where a lot of different languages being spoken, a lot of people who don't
So I
speak
think
English
one of the
interacting with police
recommendations
officers.
was to find out who is doing the interpreting and to make sure that there's a standardized test so that if, do you want this back? So that if someone is interpreting, they're actually really interpreting. And I'm not sure if you guys do that. Do you have the people, the officers that are interpreting, do they have a standardized test that they're taking in order to determine that they're actually able to interpret properly?
Okay, by way of background, in January of 2016, the city of Worcester promulgated an overriding policy as to limited English proficiency.
Come on up,
language
Gussie.
access. And any policies or protocols we use are subservient to that. So
Check
we're
it out. We
operating
got
within a
Cat.
microcosm of this overriding policy. None of our police officers are hired based upon multilingual abilities. Although luckily, many of them come to our department with the skills they have being native speakers or whatever the case. However, we don't, and we would find it inappropriate to ask each officer, well, what language do you speak? What are your abilities? The reason being that would get into their cultural heritage, and that's in a direction we ought not go, because that would seem like they're being singled out. And I've been advised that that's an inappropriate line of questioning for us to do. That said, we still have a lot of officers who have multilingual abilities, and generally speaking, they're very happy to lend their assistance to us in the course of their duties and that of other officers. There are no tests per se. As I said before, nobody is hired as a police officer, sergeant, lieutenant, captain on the basis of their linguistic abilities. We hire them as police officers, not translators. Unfortunately, we don't have translators that are hired strictly as translators, nor does the city of Worcester for that matter. So in order to put a test together to assess their abilities, that would become with considerable budgetary and contractual issues about them being tested.
What are you doing,
where
Gussie?
some are tested, others are not. And we don't have a mechanism for that. No, I know you did a great deal of research into the Denver policy. I did as well. That department is 8 times bigger than the Worcester Police Department. I don't know what their cultural makeup is in Denver, but I suspect it's fairly consistent with that here or some other cities. But we have a last chance net in the services of the language line that is administered
Got a
by
visitor
the
here,
Human
folks.
Resources Department of the City of Worcester that will enable us to speak and converse with people in 140 different languages. Now we have, I know for a fact and anecdotally, we have many dozens of police officers who speak Spanish, a handful who speak Portuguese, and a couple that speak Twi, and a number of other languages. And it just happens, and it's fortuitous that we have these officers on our staff. And again, they are voluntarily step up to provide translation services. But they're not compelled either.
Right.
If they choose not to, they're not required to. We require them to be police officers and not necessarily translators.
Look at this cat.
So you are utilizing officers to translate, because I believe we had asked this question before, and oftentimes you do utilize officers to translate. So they're providing
Pretty
translation, but we're not sure if they're fluent in the language. There's no testing to see if they're actually translating in the said language.
That's correct. There is no formalizing testing regimen, but the proof is in the pudding. If discourse occurs between the individual who comes to our counter and asks question X, if it's not a weighty subject, I'm sure for the individual it's a weighty subject, but if it's, well, how do I bail somebody out? How do I get this document? How do I get that document? Certainly a person with even limited bilingual skills can help them. And we use our staff to do that. If somebody wants to report us a certain incident, we'll use an officer who happens to have that linguistic ability to help the individual right there. And quite often people
Gus wants to be on the stream. Hey, no bites.
Yeah.
It's generally a family member, a friend, an associate, a member of their community who they trust.
So that's in the police station, but when you're in the community and something's happening and you need translation services, you have officers that are translating on the scene. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's an emergent condition.
Okay.
Any 911 call we respond to until it's determined not to be an emergency is an emergency. So it's incumbent upon us to, in a very expedited way, to find out what the nature of the incident is. Of course, if we have an individual who needs to be interrogated, issued rights, or a weighty subject that's going to have some type of long-term, whether it be judicial or right-bearing turnout at the end of the interaction, we'd certainly use the language line, or if need be, a court interpreter.
I had a question. So I was a little surprised that you said that we're not allowed to ask people who we're recruiting, or I'm not sure at what stage, whether or not they have a language ability that you're instructed not to do that. I would think if we ever did get away from the civil service exam, one of the things we would like to ask somebody is, do you have a language ability? Specifically, do you have an ability to speak Spanish? Because I would think that that would make somebody a much better officer in many different situations. So I would think that that doesn't make it so that we're hiring a police officer, we're not hiring a translator. I would think we're hiring you because you can be a better police officer because you can speak Spanish. And we have 30% of the people in our city who speak Spanish.
I would agree. I would agree. There is some value in having linguistic ability. There's a great deal of value, actually, but it has no bearing on the hiring decision insofar as in the context of civil service.
In that context, if we get away from that, it might be a very legitimate consideration.
I would agree.
So I have to confess that I'm very concerned by the responses that we received on this. And I think it's an area where we can, and I hope will, work together for immediate and really extensive change. I think that we are at risk of violating the civil rights of LEP individuals in the city. I think we are exposing the city to the possibility of civil rights lawsuits. I think that the race equity audit was really clear that the LEP community already feels like there's not good communication. And I think that the answers that you provided in good faith and deeply appreciated are deeply troubling. I think that to have individuals who are offering translation on an ad hoc basis without knowing whether or not they'll be available, without knowing the accuracy of those translations, to talk about relying on bystanders and friends when best practice policy says that absent exigent circumstances, you absolutely never should do that, and it's a violation of critical rights. These are all red flags. And I say that with deep respect and appreciation of the fact that I know you are looking at these issues. But I think if there's one thing that rises to the top of the areas of concern that I really hope we will partner on, it is this issue. I think Worcester is exposed, and I think residents in Worcester are exposed in a really real way. I would like to sort of underline the prior motions that we've passed and the prior recommendations we made to the city manager. And frankly, if the other commissioners agree, reiterate them in a new motion that says that based on the information that we received from the WPD, that it is, we would ask that attention be placed on this in an urgent matter in order to protect both the city and the individuals in that city, that there be training the use of interpreters, that there be interpretation by trained staff who have been tested on a standardized test, that there be no use of third parties absent non-exigent circumstances, that cell phones be issued for all officers on the road so that they can indeed access language line, and that data be collected that specifically allows language line to let us know when calls are being made from the Worcester Police Department, in what circumstances the language used, so that we can collect data about that. And I think it's a matter of some urgency. And I wonder if there is a second for that motion.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Can I offer a friendly amendment to suggest that it's cell phones or literally any device that could provide translation services? I don't want to limit the possibilities, but I think you encompass everything else in everything that you just stated.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And Commissioner Bellata.
I just want to say, I understand that the circumstances, like when case by case, this could be a really challenging thing to kind of manage, but I think it, would be best for, WPD among all the other, equipment that's available and that's being purchased and that the, police department's looking into. I think, this is really something that will really benefit, all of the officers out there dealing, on the job and dealing with situations that require like immediate, language interpretation. But I can absolutely understand, how if two officers are out there and there's an issue and that they need quick translation and someone speaks Spanish, obviously they're going to jump in or someone speaks Twi, like was mentioned, someone, the officers are going to jump in and I'm sure, interpret in some of these situations are obviously, emergency situations, but would be really vital for officers to have like quick access, every officer to have quick access to this type of service.
Thank you, Commissioner. Further discussion?
It seems to me that everybody would be in agreement with all of this, except for the cost of giving every officer a cell phone. I think that's what it really came down to for the city manager, that he just thought that whole thing was very cost prohibitive. Now, if we want to advocate that we want every officer to have a municipal issued cell phone and not use their own personal cell phone, sure, I'll vote for that. But I think that was a practical problem that has so far been identified.
There's no question that there are financial implications. There are also financial implications to civil rights lawsuits. So I think this is protective as well as best practice, but also protective for the city. Commissioner O'Callaghan.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight again or underscore that my sense of this is that this isn't at its core a philosophical disagreement about anything among anyone here. It is really just a matter of finding the resources for it, because I think finding a way to get that technology into the hands of
It
every
is sort of a
officer would
wild
eliminate
excuse, and it's like,
every problem that we've raised.
the city doesn't have any
ultimately,
translators, so neither do we.
Protect
It's like,
WPD
well, that's
from
twice as bad.
officers
that
being put in bad situations and the liability that
Neither the
comes with that.
city nor the
Absolutely. I just want to be clear to the officers here. There is no suggestion of bad faith or lack of interest. I mean, this is in advancing this motion. My hope, at least, and I think I speak for all the commissioners, is to give weight and to help move the department to get it the resources that it needs to have best practice policy. I think the department is exposed right now. And I think that my hope is that as a commission raising this issue, elevating this issue, talking about the real risk that the city and its residents faces will help move the issue to the top in a way that allow you to get the resources you need to meet best practice and to serve the people and to protect the people, as is your mission. So the motion is not intended as a criticism. It's intended as a real cry of concern and an attempt to get the resources to help you do your best work, as I know you want to. So if that wasn't clear, I want to make it clear. I don't view this as a confrontational. I don't view this as a gotcha, but I view this as my heart is troubled because I don't think you have the resources to do the best job here. And I think that people's lives are at risk. And I think that that's not something anyone wants to go home worried about. So I'd like to call for a vote on this motion, if I could, please, a roll call vote.
Sure. Ellen Shemitz.
Aye.
Liz O'Callaghan.
Aye.
Robert Bolano.
Aye.
Randy Feldman.
Aye.
Charles Hopkins. Aye. Bernard Reese.
Aye.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ms. Southbaum.
Motion's approved.
Thank you so much.
And that's, I think, what they're getting at with the
I
standardized
also want to give
testing.
the
It's like, who knows?
gentlemen here,
Transmitting, right?
officers, a chance if you have feedback or thoughts about this. I know we just threw a lot about you in my sort of impassioned plea. I don't mean to be on a soapbox, and I don't want you to feel that there's not a chance to respond.
But Chair, just before to that, I believe, when people going around say defund the police, I'd say increase their budget because they do one hell of a job, for a city around the country, especially in the city.
Or decrease their budget
And
and put that money towards translators that work for the city. How about that?
The resource, because then we talk about resource, and sometimes that's the whole underlining factor with anything we have. So I'm
Hire
saying
2 less
we have to
cops,
find
hire 3, 4
budget,
translators probably.
increase it to be advantageous for the police officers and the citizens of people that have this type of facility with English language proficiency. So I'm for finding the money for you guys.
Okay. Why don't? And I'm sorry. Yes, please.
Yes, through the chair. We did present a budget through technical services, a proposal to the city. It's roughly $250,000 annually to equip the department with cell phones. And beyond that, the cost of the language line, which is, as far as the devices themselves in the service, that's one thing. The language line is paid for handily by human resources. And we make great use of that. And very frequently at 4 o'clock in the morning on a rainy Sunday morning, we certainly can't find a translator on staff or somebody who could help us out. So we use the language line, and we use that quite frequently. And then again, as I mentioned before, when it gets to the weightier subjects, something where somebody's under arrest, someone needs to be imparted rights, someone needs to be given statutory warnings, that sort of thing. We absolutely use the language line, but it's a cumbersome process. You're talking through a phone to an interpreter who then sings it back, and it really slows things down. And I want to commend the officers who do step up, will drive from one end of the city to the other and come and help their brother or sister officers, and as well as the citizen, and come and interpret. And I don't believe you need to have immense skills up to a 100% level to adequately translate between some folks. As I said, the proof is in the pudding. If you have good discourse back and forth, where are you heard? Where is the loud radio that you're complaining of? Who has that? Why is your neighbor bothering you? Again, these are the minor things that entail 80% of our jobs. Tell me about the accident. This is the citation we're giving you, and this is what it's for. That sort of thing. And I don't think it needs to call for a designated staff, because quite frankly, the city doesn't have them, and we certainly don't have them. And the courts, I would suggest, is difficult to find translators sometimes.
Wow.
It's difficult in all courses. So we do the best we can, especially under emergent conditions. But again,
That's
at the end of the
crazy.
day, we have the language line when the things get really tricky.
But you don't always have language line, because police officers don't all have devices to access it. And if a police officer pulls somebody over and they don't know why they're being pulled over, and they get scared and maybe they flee, and then it becomes a chase situation, things can escalate really quickly. And absent the ability to communicate, there's risk. So I guess one question I have is, we did forward a number of recommended changes to the LEP policy. What is the process for you all? You had a draft LEP policy. We provided input. Where does that now stand, and how do we move forward?
Well, let's make clear the distinctions. Ours is based at the beginning off the city's 2016 LEP policy.
Correct.
We developed a policy which we're going to comport to federal and state laws in every single case. Where we get mired in the details and the minutia is in the protocols, which are separate and apart from the policy. Of course, insofar as policy, we're going to go to the nth degree to adequately translate spoken word, paper documents, that sort of thing, especially when it comes to imparting rights and advisories. But it's the protocols, again, at 4 o'clock in the morning on Christmas Day. You're not about to find a translator to come out and assist you. Then we have the language line.
But just to answer the specific question, so we've made these specific recommendations for additional changes to the revised policy. Can you tell us where our recommendations stand? What's going to happen with those?
I fear if we embark upon a strict testing regimen, that's going to be a change of work conditions for the police officers, and they will be required to be paid more. That's fine with me. But it's then, like civil service, developing a testing regimen. We're not Denver. We're a fraction of their size. They have much
Change in work
much more
requirements.
resources than we do.
That is music to the police
It's
union's
a far bigger
ears.
city with an enormous budget that dwarfs ours. It's.
I guess I'm a little curious about process. Maybe I'm not being clear. Please.
Through the chair to the commissioner, when we go back and forth with a policy, we then speak with Vic, and from there, we make the decision as a police department whether or not we're going to implement any of those changes.
Right.
As I said here last September, we're looking at you guys to be partners with us. we take your recommendations seriously, but we also have to look at it from a policing standpoint where we are creating specific documents with the police aspect in the document as well. So whatever recommendations we end up taking, then we form that policy.
that's a great-
Everybody
that's a great
signs off
point.
off of it, and then that's the end of it. So I'm not sure where the LEP is right now.
It's sort of interesting that civil
but we
service
do speak with
is
Vic, and we'll
an
go
equity
back and
issue in terms
forth,
of promotions, but it's
in the
also an
end, we'll have
equity
a
issue
final
in terms of you
So
can't
we're
rank
just
somebody
so you all
on
know,
their
we
language
are happy to
proficiency.
sit down with
Yeah.
you. The city managers now authorized that. So once we make recommendations, it would be helpful to sit across the table from us. There are some of us who are attorneys and have pretty decent background in this stuff, and we'll be happy to sit down with you to share whatever expertise or ideas that we have, and just let us know how we can be assistance in that.
To the chair, I think the way we have it right now, because like when we forwarded our use of force policy, that took a long, long time. And I know things take time, but when we need to change something, we need to change it. And right now, the quickest direction to do that is for me to communicate with one person. That way we can get it done. If we have to have meetings after meetings and sit down and go through every single document, it's going to hinder the advancement we want and to get these policies. I have Officer Miranda going through every single policy, him and Casey. So they
Gotta
bring
sit out
forth
on the
items,
porch for a second,
we'll
see
bring
how
it to
that
you,
rig works.
Look for your
Be right back in a
guidance,
second.
and then
I'll keep
I
this
will
running.
direct it through Vic, and then we'll come out with a final document.
So one thing I would ask to get some, from you all through Vic, to know if anything was adopted. So for example, on the use of force that you just mentioned, we gave pretty detailed recommendations for what we thought could be changed in addition to the revisions that you made. It would be helpful if there is some closing of that loop, because frankly, we put a lot of work into it. And so it's challenging when we go through really detailed recommendations and it goes out into the ether, and we frankly have no idea if they're going to be integrated at all. And so we know that you review them, but to have some feedback loop through Vic or through the staff liaison would be very much appreciated.
To the chair, I agree. And you guys are putting in a lot of time. We appreciate that. And I will communicate that with Vic to get back to you on any changes that did take place.
That's great. I very much appreciate that.
And I had the same questions on the juvenile policy. I was in charge of the juvenile work, and I didn't do such a good job. But I saw that the DEI report, the equity report, did a very good job of making different suggestions on the juvenile, such as diversion of juveniles instead of the criminal justice system, or privacy of juveniles. And I would like to hear back, not so much, Ellen sort of pitched it in for me and gave some good recommendations from that report. And I would look forward to hearing some of those enhancements from the newly developed juvenile report. I also want to ask about that juvenile report. I was surprised, but I'm not a police officer, so it's not my field. I don't know how to do this stuff. But I was surprised where it said that the handcuffing of juveniles is done in the same way as the handcuffing of adults. And, certainly if somebody's out of control and a danger to the police officer or the community, somebody would have to be handcuffed. But I was just a little surprised that there isn't a little bit more sensitivity to different circumstances when arresting a juvenile, when handcuffing the juvenile, and treating the person exactly like an adult.
Through the chair to the commissioner, every situation is taken within itself. A couple weeks ago, we had a 15-year-old almost kill a police officer. So when we get on scene, these officers are professional. They evaluate the situation. If the kid had a shoplifting warrant, something minor, we can, circumvent different things to make sure the kid's comfortable. We're going to a violent crime. A 15-year-old can kill you just as easy as a 29-year-old. And that's the way officers are trained. Things happen like this. It happens very quickly. We do take the age of the person in account and how they're acting towards us or to whoever the victim was. So we do. But as far as the CNA thing, we do not do juvenile diversion. We don't do
Look at that.
divert people. So that
Got a
statement in
tripod set
itself
up here.
within that document was incorrect because we don't have the power to do that. We only enforce the law. Once it goes to court, then the court system deals with all types of diversions.
Same for privacy concerns. It also mentioned privacy, treating juveniles different when it came to privacy concerns.
Through the chair, that's a state law. I don't know how it was mixed up in there, but the whole juvenile law, and Ed, you can help me out here, is all based on Massachusetts general law.
What we're actually going to do is our next meeting of the commission, we're going to go through the race equity audit in some fine detail and make specific recommendations to you all, including along the juvenile line. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is push this conversation to the side for now, because that really is what next month's meeting is all going to be about. With that said, so trying to keep to the data requests and the data that you all produced, unless there's an objection either by commissioners or from the police that are present, I'd like to put aside a discussion of the disaggregated data on the motor vehicle stops, the use of force, and pedestrian, because frankly, without us, I didn't see that you all had done a summary of that data with the disaggregation totals. And so I think it's going to require that we go into Excel and do a pretty rigorous data analysis before we know if there are any trends emerging, unless you all have already done that analysis, which would be great.
We didn't do that. As you saw, we offered several different data sets. We didn't know which one you would want to analyze. So I think for the use of force citations is 3 different data sets for each. So we did not do that analysis, assuming you'd rather do that analysis with the Excel.
Okay. And so given that we just got all of this basically on Friday evening, that analysis has not been done. So what I'd like to do, unless there's any objections, I said either on this side of the table or that side of the table, is put that discussion off to a later date when we've had a chance to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the data. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. So the next topic on here is emerging crime trends, predictive policing, shot spotter, and power DMS. And one of the things that has come before this commission, there's a study that was done by the MacArthur Justice Center that looked at shot spotter. And it raised some troubling findings. In a finding in Chicago, about 90% of shot spotter deployments did not lead police to find evidence of gun-related crimes.
I already watched this part.
90%. That was in Chicago, and a
really
similar
love
one
shot.
that was done in Atlanta, Georgia. 97% did not lead police to find. In that case, the question was shell casing. In Ohio, less than 2% of shot spotter alerts resulted in an arrest. In Houston, less than 2% of shot spotter alerts resulted in an arrest. So I guess the question is, so the nonprofit, nonpartisan data is raising real questions about the efficacy of it and the monies that go into it versus monies that can go into community policing. And I'm wondering if you can help us better understand the value that you find in it.
To the chair, I'm looking for my notes here, but off of memory, last year, 2023 in Worcester, there were, I believe, 116 shot spotter activations that confirmed gunshots. Of that, 71 out of the 116 were within a shot spotter area. Of that 71, 40 times no one called the police. So that in itself, right? Everybody deserves a police response for gunshots in their area. When you're looking at a crime scene, you're looking for something this big, the size of a thimble. That one casing, and I'll give you an example, in 2023, 3 firearms recovered out of the 116 we had. 3 of them accounted for 21 different shootings. One had 8 shootings on it, the other gun had 7, another had 6. The only way to know that is to collect the evidence and analyze it. from analyzing that evidence, we can draw a conclusion that somebody may be coming from another jurisdiction because shell casings are found in Lowell. Now they're found in Worcester. Now we track that gun. When we do recover it, we take that evidence, we can bring that person federally and put him behind bars where he belongs when he's doing 21 shootings. So ShotSpotter in itself, the value of that. Now, Chicago, if you look at how many ShotSpotter alerts they have, hundreds of thousands of ShotSpotter alerts. We have policies in place since 2014 that when an officer responds to a ShotSpotter alert, they have to go with another car and a supervisor. The only person to clear that scene is the supervisor. Every officer in their car has the ShotSpotter data on it with an audio recording. So they can listen to it and determine right then whether or not it's automatic gunfire, whether it's one round. And we all know from shooting thousands of rounds what a gunshot. And I can play one for you if you like. We have automatic weapons out there right now where 45 rounds are being found on scene. So we have a big hurdle to overcome. As you could see, the latest shooting incidents, and that's where I was on a 2-hour meeting prior to being here. But I can tell you right now, it's worth every penny if we can get one extra gun off the street. Based on ShotSpotter alerts last year,
Great question, right?
We recovered 12 guns out of those alerts and 10 arrests. You can't look at arrests because somebody fires a weapon today, that investigation may not come to a conclusion for another year. So the way that the McCarthy Institute, and they did that in Chicago, is all political. And if you look at the news now, every alderman wants ShotSpotter in their separate entity. The mayor of Chicago, that was one of his political standouts, saying he was going to get rid of it because he thought that it was based on race. You can't tell me that responding to a gunshot is racist. And that's kind of what they were saying.
Well, in fairness, I think the argument is that where the ShotSpotter receptors are located is racially based. And if
Can I just comment?
please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I very much appreciate that this can help you prosecute a crime and get guns off the street, which is fantastic. And then I know in Tatnick, I live in Tatnick. We see the ShotSpotter by Logan Field. There are a couple of places on the west side.
That's such an amazing quote.
Yeah, I know from my own home.
Probably responding to it.
Shots, what sounds like shots are fired. I don't know
where the sensors
exactly
was raised. Every time he's go down there, even if it's not
comfort knowing
increased goals in
the sounds of gunfire if it's happening.
People of color live.
I could have sworn
he doesn't seem to understand or want to understand that.
Made the assumption that police would be responding if it truly was gunfire because the ShotSpotters are in our neighborhood.
I'm sorry.
I also wanted to make a similar comment that I would imagine that the ShotSpotters are located where there most often historically has been shot. So where the crime is. And I, for one, I understand that I disagree with people further on the left than I am, but I'm very glad that we have ShotSpotter, and I'm glad that you have it available to you. And I think that anything we can do to make our city safer is a good idea, including ShotSpotter.
And to the chair, if I can just clarify one thing, when we set up the actual boundaries, we started out with 6 miles, it's been expanded to 8. All that mileage is based on 5 years of historical data of where people are being shot or shots were fired where ground truth evidence was found. And that's how they create the area. You need 3 ShotSpotter sensors to triangulate one gunshot. So when you say they're all in different places, they're there. We have 7 Hills in Worcester, so they have to put them in different locations so that they can triangulate the actual muzzle blast.
So at the outset of your comments about this, you were, and I was searching for it quickly. I can't find where it is in the written report that you gave us, the statistics that you gave us. did you tell us, and I'm sorry, I apologize if you did, I just wasn't following you quickly enough, the percentage of shot spotter calls that do lead to an arrest in Worcester? I understand that the Chicago data is wholly different, but did you share that with us? And I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
To the chair, it's either 12 and 10 or 10 and 12.
Here.
It is in the document somewhere. I
It says
believe it
12
was,
arrests, 8 firearms recovered, I believe, from at least the Word document. I apologize. I just want to share.
So I guess my question is, so this is, of the shootings, we know that 70 out of 116 involved a shot spotter alert, and I can't do the percentages quickly enough to do that accurately. But I guess my question, and 70 of the shot spotter calls led to 12 arrests. Can you tell us overall how many shot spotter calls there were in the past year and how many arrests resulted from those calls?
It's
to the
so
chair,
wild.
that 517 is overall gunshots throughout the whole city, not just the 8 miles of shot spotter. So when you look at the,
I guess my question's a little different, and I'm sorry if I'm being opaque. My understanding of the concerns about ShotSpotter is that because they are located in areas where there have been shootings, which makes sense. I'm not criticizing that. I'm trying to explain the criticism. So because of where they're located, if the percentage of calls that ShotSpotter calls in, for want of a percentage of incidents that ShotSpotter calls in, lead to increased police presence, but a very low percentage of those calls actually lead to arrests, then they're false alerts. But those false alerts lead to an increased police presence in those areas where there has been crime in the past. And that can lead to a self-perpetuating reality. That's the concern. And that's why I'm asking overall, how many ShotSpotter incidents were called into the police? And of that overarching number, what percentage led to arrests? It's a different calculus than the number you're giving us. I see and appreciate the value of the numbers you're giving us, but I'm asking for a somewhat different numerical perspective.
well, I can tell you that 95% of all ShotSpotter alerts were actually confirmed either by an algorithm where
That's not.
when a ShotSpotter alert comes in, that gunfire is triangulated, it's sent, the sound wave is sent to California. They review it, they get back to us within 1 minute. So within 1 minute, you have officers arriving on scene, rendering medical aid to whomever's been shot. 80% of the time, no one calls the police. So as far as this, I don't have the exact number, but I can tell you that 95%, there was some type of event that can be concluded as a gunfire.
But that's confirmed by the for-profit company that sells ShotSpotter. So
No, that's confirmed by us because I listen to it. We listen to it. We see an algorithm. Officers find shell casings. I can get you the number of shell casings we found and get you all that data.
yeah, it's just a simple question. I'm not trying to be argumentative, but would be really helpful to have, because I think that Commissioner Feldman is right that there is a lot of attacks, which this commission may or may not agree with, but I'm just trying to get the pure objective data. How many ShotSpotter incidents are called in on an annual basis? And of that number, how many arrests are made? So I can get that percentage. It's just looking for pure data so that we better understand. I understand the arguments on both sides. I'm not trying to take a position out of it. I'm just trying to get the data.
But I would think that arrests is different than shell casings.
It is.
Right?
And
Shell
so you can
casings
ask
is
that
enough
question.
proof that the algorithm was correct.
So why don't we
not
do
arrests.
both? How many incidents were called in, and what number of those incidents, were shell casings found, and in what number of those incidents were arrests made? Because you're absolutely right, Commissioner Feldman, they're different questions, but they're both important questions. And so if we could get that, it would be deeply appreciated.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there other questions on this topic before we move on? Okay, what I'm going to do in light of the hour is suggest that we move to the section. And again, I don't want to.
I'm gonna check these
I don't want you
responses
all
in
to
here
feel
to the
that we're
shot
not
spotter
looking at the other
questions.
data that you've provided, which is really extensive and appreciated. I am trying to be mindful of time. And so I would suggest that we move on to the discussion of the quality of life team and responses to homeless encampments, which are questions.
Okay, so
10,
shot spotter
to
2023. This is in the
3.
response document to question 24.
Yes, 23.
517
Is
incidents
there
were
any
alerted
objection
on.
to moving to that?
Of 517 incidents,
Okay.
116 involved shootings.
So,
Of the
this
116
is an
shootings,
area,
70 of those
as- in
incidences
case you
revolved
didn't know
a
that,
shot spotter
you
alert.
know,
What?
we voted our top priorities for the work of the Human Rights Commission and working with the police to ensure
This doesn't make any sense.
equity.
I would
in all
encourage
of the work
everyone
of the
to look
police
at
department and its protection of the residents of Worcester.
question
is our number one
24
priority,
responses here.
that
It doesn't-
partnership. The second one is looking at issues of homelessness and housing. And so question
Anyway, the
23
homeless question here
really
is
is at the
important.
intersection of our two top priorities. Actually, housing was our third. Our second was DEI issues. My apologies. I wanted to know if we could ask you, just for folks who didn't have a chance to read all of this, just give us a summary of what you've shared here. If you prefer, I can do it, but I've been talking a lot, so I want to give you that opportunity.
Through the chair, just to go over the numbers that are in the report real quick. What our inspectional services in conjunction with our quality of life team, we received 2,300 total complaints that came in from different sources throughout the community. Because of the way we code these complaints, you can't parcel all of those out as homeless encampments. What we did find out through the quality of life team is about 611 of those complaints were directly related to the encampments. The rest of the report basically is talking about Mass General laws, where the encampments were located, whether it was on personal property, state property, and whether the trespassings and stuff like that, and the most significant top 17, I believe, places that we check on based on reacting to calls from the community.
So I was a little confused by some of the numbers, and I wondered if you could help me understand them. You talked about 611 complaints being directly related to the encampments. But then on the next page, you talked about out of 2,300 complaints, but then the next page talked about 2,473 incidents with quality of life issues being 363. I just couldn't get my mind around the different numbers. If you could help me with that.
Sure. I think the only discrepancy is on the first page where it talks about a total of 2,300 total complaints that were combined with inspectional services and quality of life that were received from different sources into the police department.
This is question
discrepancy is on the second page
23.
where it says CIT quality of life article
So
24
down
73. So
14,
there's a difference of a couple hundred there.
13,
I think it's just
14,
the way the sergeant that did
15.
the report parceled out the different codes within our CAD system. But I think overall, somewhere between 2,300 and 2,473 total calls for 2023. But what's more important, out of those two numbers that are very close together, they identified approximately 611 of those complaints were specifically related to encampments.
Okay, thank you. And I wasn't trying to nitpick. I truly was confused and wanted to make sure I understood the discrepancy. So I guess my next question, and I'd really encourage other commissioners who have a much deeper knowledge base in this area than I do to jump in, please. But it indicates on the next page that the quality of life team did not directly displace anyone from an encampment last year.
Such a
Which
lie.
seems directly at odds with news reports, which pretty consistently are talking about the displacement of folks in these homeless camps. And I'm not challenging, I'm seeking to understand.
Sure, no one, through the chair, no one is taking it as a challenge. what we do with inspectional services, quality of life, they're the first to go in. And it's a combination, as we know, of police and civilian city personnel working together. So we don't want to have that enforcement aspect at all with those two entities coming together.
It's
We're
part
all
of the
about
enforcement aspect, though. They show up before the camp is
identifying,
cleared. When they show up, that means the
who's
camp's getting
willing
cleared.
to,
They're clearing the camp.
or who wants resources. So they
That's
go in there as
fucking
soft as possible with the offering of any help that we can give them. This happens over and over again. Sometimes anywhere between 3 and 6 times they might go in as a team, all about offering services.
Yeah, what
in
services?
In the rare cases where no one is willing to take any assistance in any way, but we've pushed to a line where something enforcement action has to take place. Typically, we would bring in our neighborhood response team officers to then do that enforcement aspect of it. So we weren't trying to be sneaky around the question at all. The question was specific to inspectional services and quality of life team.
That sounds kind of sneaky.
Not for those specific reasons. So we keep those strong relationships with the community, specifically the homeless community or unsheltered, that they'll be willing to work with us and take any resources we can offer. But when push comes to shove and nothing comes about it, and property owners, state property, whatever trespassing happen, then we would ask the neighborhood response team to come in so we don't lose that relationship that exists with the other two groups. So I don't have those numbers for you today as far as how many encampments or removals took place with the neighborhood response team. But if that's something the commission wants to dig down to, we could try to provide that.
So of course, you completely anticipated my question. So what would be very helpful to get would be the number of incidents involving between the neighborhood response team and homeless individuals, the number of times they were called, the number of encampments that were impacted, the number of individuals that were impacted. And also there's been concern about when the neighborhood response team is called in, and I really appreciate you helping me understand the difference between that and the quality of life team, that individuals have been separated from their belongings. And here you talk about the fact, and I appreciate you talk about it, the quality of life team stores belongings. I'm not sure that's the same with the neighborhood response team. And so if you could get us some information as to that, because what I'd like to see,
Even that
ideally,
is bullshit.
some
They
sort
just
of
deem
policy
the
about
campsite
ensuring
abandoned if no
in
one is
those
there
cases
at that particular
where
moment.
the quality of
and
life
they throw it
team
away.
is unable to assist with the peaceable relocation of an encampment. And the neighborhood response team does come in to have some policies about the type of notice that's required, and also what policies are in place to ensure that individuals are reunited with their belongings. But we can't sort of make a recommendation for a policy there unless we have the data on what's currently happening.
Through the chair, no problem. We can look into getting that data as soon as possible. But there is, I don't know the exact answer, but very similar to the quality of life team, when there's voluntarily, they agree to move and there's a 30-day to hold their property. Very similar when the NRT goes in there and ends up having to be of a forced removal, a summons, or an arrest. There's also something in place. I just don't have the specific answer to not just leave their property there. There's a cleanup process that comes in. And I think a lot of times the removal from their property is the individuals never return to get wherever we house their property. So there is a process that I can provide in that report.
Yeah, if you could get us,
does.
my apologies. So I guess I would do a two-part request, both for the data, but then also for the policies and protocols. And I see that there are two commissioners who have their hands raised, and I don't know who raised their hand first, so I'm going to let the two of you decide that. So I think
All right,
Commissioner Bellata, Liz is giving you the go-ahead.
All right, thank you. I know that mental health, and we know that mental health and substance abuse are really intertwined, and a lot of folks that are unsheltered and dealing with substance abuse have mental health challenges. Just curious if you could speak to like the efficacy of like the CIT team, and or maybe just just curious how many individuals that were contacted or that individuals that you encountered who are unsheltered might have ended up seeking assistance or receiving assistance, or just how effective like the CIT team is, seeing it. It's like a fair, newer program that the WPD has that the city's rolling out. Was just curious about like if there's any like anecdotal information about how, the CIT team, how it's working out with the quality of life team.
Through the chair, that's something, especially when he said anecdotal, we could probably come up with something, but as far as number of interactions and referrals and stuff like that, I just don't have that data today.
Just to follow up, is that something that the CIT or that WPD would have, or is that something that HHS would have? Just curious.
Our quality of life and CIT team keep track of their interactions and their referrals in addition to our PAR program. So there is data that's housed within the WPD that we could look into.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Callaghan.
Thank you. Just speaking from the perspective of a mental health professional, there's a couple of us on the commission. I can very much appreciate that this is also very much a resource problem and a very complex, multifaceted one at that. I'm sure you know as well as I do, having to section folks and finding out, they're struggling a few weeks later because they weren't able to access wraparound support, or they weren't able to access any services after discharge, that the systems in place are not fantastic, despite a lot of effort going into developing that infrastructure. I'm wondering, when we had the homelessness task force come speak to us in January, they were supposed to have a social worker. I believe there was a vacancy there. Do you happen to know, do they have a social worker working with them, or is that vacancy continued all these months?
Through the chair, just a follow-up question. When you were asking about the social worker, is that with our CIT people, or you mentioned some other group?
Yeah, I know the CIT folks. There is also a 40-hour social worker that works with you, right? I think. And then there's also separately among the quality of life team, specifically the homelessness task force, there is supposed to be a social worker there, but there was a vacancy.
Through the chair. So within our CIT, we have, through a grant, a licensed clinician that I believe works approximately 20 hours a week and goes out and does outreach work with the CIT unit.
I'm thinking, I'm realizing that you probably don't have the information about the status of the social worker on the quality of life team and the specifically the homelessness task force. But for the social worker who works with CIT, are they a resource that you're able to utilize to go along to these calls to help folks access services and ideally relocate to a safer location?
Through the chair, yes. The clinician that we have through the state grant that works 20 hours with our CIT unit does exactly that. When she comes into work, she goes through all the past reports, all the past interactions, identifies those that might be in need of resources or be willing to accept resources. And then she goes out with the CIT officers and does follow-up work throughout the day.
Thank you. Just a couple follow-up questions, if it's okay. And really just a comment that as I'm hearing 20 hours a week as a mental health professional with the scope of the difficulties in the city, that just seems woefully inadequate, and certainly not anyone's fault here, but I really hope more resources can be allocated in the future once that pilot program is expanded. And just wanted to share the very likely possibility that the quality of life task force, the quality of life team is probably still experiencing that vacancy. And just to quickly, get on my soapbox just a little bit, that there was a recent mayor's mental health council meeting where the person who was involved in this was asking about that vacancy and saying, we're really struggling. We need a social worker. Can you help us? And the head of HHS told him to talk to the local director of HHS, not realizing that he works under Dr. Castile, and Dr. Castile is aware of the problem and no one really has a solution. But I digress. My only other question is, I noticed that homeless encampment isn't listed as a complaint currently. I loathe to say this because I want to think that the problem could be solved and we won't need this, but is it possible for homeless encampment to be added as an option for the purposes of data collection?
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you.
Liz, Commissioner O'Callaghan, would you like to make a motion with that request so it's part of the record, or are you okay with this conversation?
Yes, I think for formality's sake, I should make the request. Make the motion. Can I motion to ask that the city manager work with the Worcester Police Department to add homeless encampment as a complaint option for the purposes of data collection?
Is there a second for that?
Second.
And could we do a roll? Oh, is there further discussion? Roll call, please.
Ellen Shemitz,
Aye.
Liz O'Callaghan,
Aye.
Robert Bellotta,
Aye.
Randy Feldman,
Aye.
Charles Hopkins,
Aye.
Bernard Reese,
Aye.
Jacqueline Yang.
Aye.
Motion's approved.
Thank you so much.
I had just one follow-up. You know, I admire the police department for trying to pair social workers through this pilot program with police officers and send them out together. Especially, not to beat a dead horse, but especially if we get away from the civil service requirement, I think it would be very advantageous for the police department to recruit either social workers or people who study social work in schools to try to get them to become police officers, because the actual direct training and then following it up with the police training would give someone such an advantage instead of just sending two people out together, where the social worker would be highly valuable. Some cases, the police officer maybe have to look out for the social worker or something, but if the social worker was also a police officer, boy, that would be a great police
Why don't you just have less cops and more social workers?
Commissioner Bellotta?
Just in spirit of motions, I just wanted to make a motion.
Wouldn't have to get rid of
request
civil service
the
for
city
that,
manager to
just
request
wireless
any
police.
information on the amount of if there, as was mentioned, WPD has that information about the number of individuals who might have received sources or were directed to services or access services. I think it would be great to get that information. So I just like to make a motion to request the city manager request that information from the WPD.
Is there a second to that motion?
Through the chair.
Yes.
Just want to clarify something. Are we specific to homeless encampments when we're talking about CIT and social workers and our clinician referrals? Because not all referrals surround around homeless encampments. I just want to make sure that the request that you're asking for, so we can pull the right data.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I apologize.
So I think I would ask the commissioner who posed the question. We've been mostly talking about homeless encampments and CIT, quality life, going out and trying to make referrals, but there's a lot more work that CIT does and goes out and has contacts and makes referrals that are not surrounding homeless encampments
Right.
or homelessness in general. It might just be for drug addiction and other things going on.
I believe this question, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
Commissioner, is related to homeless encampments and homelessness.
Yes, I think honestly, it would be great to have both because I think it would, if the Human Rights Commission could help push for growing this program when the pilot's over, I think it would be beneficial for us to see how it's working and the impact that it's had. So if it could be for, the information data for homelessness encampments and also just, other referrals, I think that would be really beneficial.
So, Commissioner,
So
I do
sorry,
have a
I just-
suggestion, just if I could just one thought. So the reason that Commissioner O'Callaghan did a motion was because it was asking to do a change in the complaint intake form. So that would be a policy and practice change. The question, Commissioner Bellotta, that you're asking is a data request that I believe the police department has already indicated they're going to jump on. So that might be the reason you're not hearing a second, is because we're not talking about a policy or practice change, but just a data request that the police are going to jump on. And perhaps it would make sense
Okay,
that
thank you.
once we get that data, if it's not everything we need, and if we're not able to work it out with the police, what we need, that there may be a policy issue there. But I think right now it's just a matter of communications to get the data before the commission, if that's okay.
Yes, yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay.
And I'm so sorry to interrupt. If I can just remind the commission too, that when we met a few months back, one of the requests that was made, and I apologize, maybe last year or at the start of this pilot program, that the Human Rights Commission requested that at the conclusion of the year-long pilot, that the Worcester Police Department come back and talk to us with the conclusions and the data around that pilot, which is the social worker going along with CIT.
And that's going to be when again,
Shay,
Commissioner?
I'll send it along.
I want to say the pilot maybe started in September. I apologize,
This
Mr. Chief Saucier. I don't know if you know off the top of your
is
head.
all of the questions they're going
But I
over
can
and
find
the
out for
police's
the commission if not.
response. But
If I may,
this
Madam Commissioner.
I'm
through
about
you
to grab the
the-
link
to
for.
the, Commission, I think we need to be clear on what we're talking
Is
about.
the folder
The pilot is the
of
mobile
all of the
crisis
data the police
response,
provided
which was
to the
a
Human
grant
Rights
awarded
Commission.
to Community Health Link about a year ago to be initiate a pilot program where they would respond with us to various calls at our behest. So they would field a 911 call, and obviously a police officer would be sent to the scene.
Right now we're on question
ambulance or fire,
26,
as
I
the
think.
case may be.
I don't know. I've kind of
And
been zoning out
if,
working on
it
something
was
else. So
mental health in nature, mobile crisis response would respond to that scene and take over the call. And our officers would then maintain security to the satisfaction of the clinician responding from Community Health Link. That is something separate and apart from our CIT officers. As far as bright line rules, I like to think of it, CIT officers deal primarily with long-term problem solving, the people we deal with, our officers deal with over and over again. But if an individual's in acute mental crises as a result of a mental health issue, as an addiction of homelessness, or whatever confronts the problem, mobile crisis response will respond, and it's now only a pilot basis still. They will respond to handle the call for us and with us, as the case may be.
And do you know when that pilot wraps up?
It's continuing to evolve. They've had a great deal of difficulty with staffing, and Community Health Link has had some issues with their hierarchy and so forth, but it's back on the tracks. And I just met with those individuals last week, and they're expanding it now to citywide. It's still running from the hours of 3 to 11, and they're seeking our assistance in when to expand it later, earlier, and to what shifts. So I speak with them weekly as to how we go about expanding their services. I think it's a great program. It puts clinicians right there, meeting people where they are, out there in the street, and trying to get them into the comprehensive Community Health Link services, which has a lot more resources than we are able to provide.
Okay, thank you.
I apologize. I was under the possibly incorrect belief that the licensed clinician was through the pilot program, but does CIT have a clinician working with them separately? Because if so, that is wonderful.
Through the chair, yes, that's what I was referring to earlier with the 20 hours a week. That's through a state grant that we have a licensed clinician with CIT, 20 hours a week, that goes out and does follow-ups to those repetitive, long-term mental health issues that are going on in the community, to try to offer up services and have one-on-ones with individuals.
I see. Thank you. And I apologize, Commissioner Bellotta, was that the information that you were looking for as far as the referrals that the clinician is able to make in working with mobile crisis and CIT as appropriate? Okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
So
thank you.
Thank you so much. I am mindful of the time, and we are already a little bit over now. Of course, it's our want to go over. I don't think we've ended before 9 o'clock anytime in the last several months, but let's shoot to make sure that we don't go beyond that. I do not have, there was a lot more information in the packet you gave us. I tried to pull out those issues that were top of the line for us, but I don't want to give short shrift to anything either that you all wanted to make sure you brought to our attention or that other commissioners had questions about. So I just want to offer that opportunity again, on both sides of the table. And then we can just move forward to planning next steps in this conversation and then other business on the agenda. So is there anything further
Yeah, we
from
got
you
about
all that you want to make sure? Again,
10 minutes left
I
on
never
this
want you to
bad
feel
boy.
that you compile us all of this information and it doesn't get the
Right.
light of day. I'm
A
just trying
lot
to
of
be
interesting
respectful of
stuff in
the time.
here and a
Yes,
lot
Chief.
more to dig into in
Commissioner,
the data.
Just one thing back on the shot spotters. If
A
it's a
lot
revolver,
more
there are no
productive.
shell cases. So that's just something else that goes into the analysis of all the evidence collected.
That's helpful. Thank you for that clarification.
I had one other thing. First of all, like our chair, I wanted to thank you for the unbelievable comprehensiveness of your answers. There was it took a lot of time on your part. It's very much appreciated on our part and I'm sure the part of the public. So thank you. And some of the statistics that I found there that I wanted clarification on, it was interesting. It said display of stun gun went down from 56 times in 2022 to 2 times in 2023. But display of a firearm went up from 130 times in 2022 to 203 times in 2023.
Sounds
I
like
don't know
they-
if those statistics, especially the stun gun statistic, if that's a change in policy, a coincidence, or where does that all come from and what does it mean?
Yeah, we'll have to look at the stun gun. So we added a category of using your hands. I work with technical services. They have an automation program. It just might have been a coding issue with that. So we'll have to look at that.
Yeah, just for clarification, Commissioner, that's the discussion that we had with Captain Davenport, that I think there may have been an Excel kind of issue where cells or rows got moved. So they're going to re-look at that and get back to us because the numbers do jump significantly, but not consistently. So they're going to take a look at that. Okay, so given the time, what I tend to do at the end of these meetings is go through a compilation of everything we agreed to, but I don't think you guys really want to hear that. And I'm sure you were taking your own notes and I'm sure that Vic was taking notes. So I am going to rely on that. But Vic, maybe before we even do the full minutes of it, you and I could work on a list just to support the police department in getting that information back to us. We usually have to have a second meeting, but you all have been so comprehensive. I'm not sure we need to schedule that now. I think what we need to do is get this additional information from you. And then if we have questions, see if you'd be willing to come in and discuss that with them. Does that work for the other commissioners and for you, gentlemen? Oh.
I had one question on that. So the equity report was so comprehensive and we, I think, done so well. I didn't know if you wanted an opportunity to meet with us again, because we certainly as a commission want to delve further into that because there's so much there.
They're
And
like,
I don't
God,
know if it's
no,
helpful
please,
to you or
no.
not, or you already have the city council, you have your own internal workings. You don't really need to talk to the public through us about the equity report, or if you would find it helpful if we had a meeting where we would do our research, we would present our questions, and you would respond to those. I don't know if you find that helpful or repetitive of things you already do.
Through the chair, I would defer the city manager on that. I know he has different listening sessions or whatever that they're setting up. So I'd rather go through him first, see how he wants to handle that. It was a comprehensive report. And matter of fact, we all put together answers to all those questions. And a lot of that stuff that was recommended, we were already doing. So that report is 4 years.
Yeah,
So we've come a
yeah,
long
except
way
for
in 4
removing from
years.
civil
And
service.
a lot of those issues that came up were already rectified or being worked on.
A lot of the
So if I
things in
could
that
ask you,
report we
our
were already
next
doing,
meeting
except for the
is
big ones
a
that were
deep
important.
dive on the race equity audit. And we're going to divvy up the sections among the different commissioners, ask them to come back and basically do a thumbs up or thumbs down on each of the recommendations that was made in the audit, whether we believe those need to be a priority, as well as to pull some best practice from the research. If you all have done written answers or anything in a way that you could share with us, it would be really helpful to have that so that we're not then making recommendations and passing motions that are dated. So if there's anything of that that you could share with us, it would be deeply appreciated.
To the chair, again, I'm working with the city manager's office. I want to get that completed document to them prior to releasing anything to the public.
Okay, understood. We'll go forward with our piece.
Yeah, that's,
and it may be that there'll be future conversations about that in order to move it forward. That would be really helpful.
That's the really sort of
Before I move
thing that
on
has
to
me
the
scratching
other
my head
business
about
of the
this is the city
commission,
manager
and I
is
know
just
that the commissioners
the
are
cops
just
are
as
being
anxious as
more
you all to get out of here.
helpful
I
to the
just want to
to the,
again
HRC than the
voice
city
my
manager,
thanks
which
to
is
each and every one of
kind of
you,
weird.
not just for being here this evening and for your grace
like
in answering questions and sometimes
not wanting to
hard
put stuff
questions,
in writing.
but also all the time you took for compiling this
That's like,
report, which is really comprehensive.
that's something
We
you do
come
when
to
you know you're
expect
doing
that
something
from Captain
wrong.
Davenport, but this has clearly been a team effort, and we are very appreciative.
Thank you again for having us.
Thanks. You're welcome to stay as we move on to administrative, but you're also free to get the heck out of here. Thank you, gentlemen. So we just have two really quick issues, guys. I know you all want to get out of here as well. The March meeting, as you know, was canceled because we didn't have quorum. That was the meeting that was supposed to be, thank you all. That was the meeting that was supposed to
So
be about
we're
the
still
race
waiting for
equity
some
audit.
information back now.
My recommendation
particularly
is that we simply move that agenda
the thing about
to our
homeless encampments.
next meeting, which
having,
is I'm losing control of the months here, which would be our
their
June
own
meeting.
reporting
But I
category will be
also know
especially
that there's some
interesting.
concern that we move quickly on that, and
and
that
some
may
more-
be more than a 2-hour meeting. So there is the possibility of holding 2 meetings, either another
But
one this month or 2 in June.
I got my,
and I'd just like to open up that for
my sort of
discussion.
structure
what
for
the will of the commission is.
how to write about this stuff, and I think that definitely the big.
Through the chair, June 24th, I'll be out of town.
Oh,
So
I
the
should
one
probably
in
listen
May,
to
I'm
this.
in town all of May, and then I'll be in town every week, but the 24th.
Commissioner O'Callaghan.
Thank you. I have had a number of members of the public reach out to me about the racial equity audit. I know that folks it sort of feels like all eyes are on us to do this work. And so I know that I've prepared a number of things based on the use of force recommendations, and I'm prepared to present on that. But I could see that and all of the other things that we were going to go through, such as the data that we received a couple months ago that we haven't been able to go through yet, taking up a substantial amount of time, and so would support whatever would be within the availability of the rest of the commission.
Well, I myself found the racial equity audit to be incredibly sophisticated and helpful document. I thought that was quite a analysis. But I don't know if we need 2 meetings yet. I think maybe whoever read it and would like to present on it can present on it in one, and then we'll maybe decide after that if we need a second meeting.
Would people be, I've gone through the audit with fine tooth comb, which will surprise no one, but I really think that it would behoove the commission if we do divvy it up. We tried to do that for the last meeting with some mixed success. Would it be okay with the commissioners if Vic, Liz, and I reached out to some of you individually and asked you to take sections, again, in an administrative way, not in a substantive way, but just ask that you present on different sections so that we divvy up that work prior to the next meeting? Would that be okay with all of you?
Not only would it be okay, but I think we did that once already. So I don't mind taking on additional responsibilities, but I spent a lot of time on the one that was assigned.
Wonderful. Okay, so we will build on that. So what I think I'm hearing
Behooves
is
is a
that
great
we're
word.
going to not immediately schedule a second meeting, not try to make up for the missed meeting in March. We will keep the June meeting, unfortunately, understanding that it won't be. There will be the virtual option if you can join us virtually. And then if we are not able to get through all of it, or even if we do get through all of it, if we see the need for additional meetings, we can at that time determine to hold additional meetings. Is that okay with everyone? Excellent. The only other thing then is to let you all know that at the June meeting, we're going to have our annual leadership elections. We're a little bit behind on that. So there'll be the opportunity to vote again on your chair and your vice chair, as well as if, and I think Liz and I
That's
will
an
both be
appropriate
invited to
summary.
continue to serve, but understand if you would like to see other voices here. The other thing is that there is an opening on for clerk, and if somebody else would like to step up to a leadership position and do so as clerk, that would be very welcome. So that will be on the next agenda. And I think that's all we've got. And we are actually 9 minutes short of 9 p.m. So I'm feeling pretty darn proud. But is there anything else that anyone would like to discuss before I call for adjournment? Liz.
I'm so sorry. Just wanted to raise that we may also have hopefully the responses from post, and we still have those 3 requests that we had made, I want to say back in October, if I remember correctly, and we eventually received those. The city manager released that information publicly. I know some of us have gone through it, but we haven't been able to discuss it as a commission.
Yes.
So just wanted to make sure that was on everybody's radar.
Yes, and also
This,
we may
actually,
well
this is
then have the
this is
evening-
from
Remember, the
Monday.
police department did submit significant.
I just haven't been able to watch the whole thing
investigation
yet,
reports,
so
the early intervention
kind of a
trigger
spur of the
reports,
moment
then
decision
the hate crime reports. To
this
the
afternoon to
assistant-
just
to the
watch
city
it
solicitor,
with anybody
and
else who wants to
hopefully Vic
on the
will
Twitch stream.
Be able to get those into our hands before the next meeting as well. So there, it is not unlikely that we will find that we need some extra time to make sure that we don't fall behind. But at this point, we don't need to make that decision. Okay, with that, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a first and second on that one?
I'll first that.
Yeah, do I have a second?
I second it.
Okay, can we have a roll call, please, Vic?
Ellen Shemitz,
Aye.
Liz O'Callaghan,
Aye.
Robert Pilata,
Aye.
Randy Feldman,
Aye.
Charles Hopkins,
Aye.
Bernard Reese,
Aye.
Jacqueline Yang. Ayes have it.
So I just have to say, you know, we routinely thank our guests and the time they give. It does not go unnoticed that you guys are incredibly generous, incredibly well prepared, and incredibly attentive. And I am grateful to all of you. So thank you and have a lovely evening.
All right. So that was the Monday meeting of the Human Rights Commission, the annual interview with the police. Here's what I'm looking at. Oh, sorry. Here's what I'm looking at writing about this. I think that the highlights are definitely, the data provided about the Bureau of Professional Services and the disciplining of officers. In particular, the one cop who got a DUI in Shrewsbury, and the DUI got dismissed, of course, because he's a cop, but then he had to just work an extra 5 days. That was pretty funny. Civil service was obviously a huge issue here, and the civil service as it relates to the fact that the Worcester Police Department doesn't have any translators. And the excuse given that, translators are something that we can't pay for because the city doesn't pay for any translators. So why would we have translators if the city doesn't have translators? It's a pretty bullshit excuse. And then on top of that, you can't rank an officer higher as more valuable if they know a second language, because civil service that's not a requirement of the civil service in any way. So you can't actually make that inform your decision on whether to hire an officer if they can speak Spanish or any other language, because civil service doesn't fucking test for your Spanish. But another topic that I thought was interesting was the little exchange over the plainclothes officer who was wearing the thin blue line patch. And I thought that was a good sort of pushback on the on the police department by Ellen Shemitz, the Human Rights Commission member, being like, "No, I think that we should have policies mandating that officers shouldn't be wearing that because it's a highly charged political symbol." Sort of a stand-in for all lives matter type bullshit. And then, of course, the data provided on the response to homeless encampments and how they respond to it, and the sort of wiggly way that they dance around saying that they actually, the quality of life team doesn't clear out encampments. They just visit the encampment 3 times a week in the week leading up to it getting cleared out, but they don't clear the encampments, which is that's just a shitty lie. That's just a very shitty lie. And there's a lot of data in the responses that's revealing and interesting, especially the volume of calls that they got to go to homeless encampments. It's like, I don't know, it's like 2,000 something calls. And, that's this complaint-based model for dealing with homeless encampments is something that I've written about a lot. And it's something I actually just yesterday recorded a big, long video essay about, which I am excited to share once it's done being edited. I think it's going to be nice. I did it in the Rewind store and it was cool. Yeah, that was very, very weird. I don't know what to make about that one. But anyway, thank you everyone who hung out. We will be back on Tuesday for more city council punishment, of course. But before then, I would encourage everyone watching to head on down to freaking Coney Island tonight for Sean and Brian will be there for the hot dog event, which I've heard is a really good time. And I'm thinking about going down myself, but I'm not sure yet. And yeah, go eat some hot dogs and do some comedy. Subscribe to us if you haven't. That's cool. It helps us out, helps us pay our StreamYard bill. And that's nice. And, check out my newsletter, worcestersucks.email, and, all the other stuff we usually plug. I don't know. I don't usually do these plugs at the end, and I'm not going to try to do a real good job of that. Oh, sounds like Katie's home. So from her first full day back at work since all the health stuff. So gonna catch up with her on how her first full formal day back went. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next Tuesday.